I think, right? Kevin, okay, Kevin's on it. Look at that. All right. And if people can hear us, that's all right. We're just starting to let people come into the feed here. I'm going to go ahead and check everything. We have a little new intro for folks. Kevin, our producer, has been working behind the scenes, doing some cool stuff, bringing it to us. We're very excited tonight, if you guys can hear us, to bring Chuck Swindoll back to our show for some Q&A. And Chuck, I want to thank you for doing a little promo and that amazing Bach. I believe that was in B minor. Thank you for that. That was beautiful.
You're welcome. Glad to do it. I love Bach. He's a hero of mine. I love him to death.
Well, nobody's more excited about Chuck coming on the show as I am.
Thank you.
So, yeah, I really enjoyed the last one, and I love your work. I'm a big fan.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate that someone's doing the work you're doing. It's fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and we're definitely we're gonna roll a new intro that Kevin's been working on, and then I just want to say to the audience that I'm honored to be in the presence of, well, three gentlemen too, Kevin in the background, that have even done likely more research than I on this. And it's just, I learn every show that we do. And like Scott and Chuck were talking about earlier, I mean, thousands of hours of research, and we're still looking. It's like we don't exactly have the answers to a lot of this stuff. So it's
it never really ends, does it?
Right. No.
I mean, the untold hidden history of the world is it's pretty fascinating. It's something that it's kind of a survival strategy at this point.
Yeah, it very much is. I'm really excited though for all that we're going to find out. I have no fear at all about what will be disclosed. At this point, I think the efforts that have been made and everyone who have been a part of this great awakening have done a fantastic job, because I think a lot of people in the world know a lot more now than they did 5 years ago. And that really has been the hard work and effort of people like us, of people who just have an inquisitive mind and are not willing to just take the stories that are handed out. And that really has been a critical part of the recovery of humanity, is that each person is doing the research, the work that they need for their own life. And people who are sensitive enough and who care enough will take the time, their own time, and will explore and search for answers, and not just take the answers that are handed down. And that's really, I feel, a big responsibility for us as human beings, is that we just don't take what's spoon-fed, but we really get out and participate, get out and explore and learn. And because like you said, the learning never ends. So yeah, that's a critical part of this.
Beautiful. Well, people are asking if this is an audio only broadcast. It is not. We are just testing something out. Kevin, go ahead, let the intro rip, and then we'll show our faces. So please go right ahead. Thank you, Kevin.
There used to be a great tower alone on the sea. You became the light on the dark side of me. Love remains.
All right.
There it is. The search is on TruthStream with Joe Scott and Chuck Swindoll. Ladies and gentlemen, what an honor to have Chuck here. We just want to start the show tonight by saying thank you for you guys for tuning in. We do talk about unique subject matter, and as much as we've studied and looked into this, we were talking about this a little bit earlier. Not everyone that we look to as human beings are we going to be in agreement with 100% of what it is that they bring to the table. And I thought it might be good to start with that topic. Chuck, did you care to give the viewers some insight on that? Please go ahead.
Yeah, well, part of researching, a big part of it is discernment. And discernment requires, or the process of discernment is looking through all the evidence that's there, looking, not just listening to a person say one or two things, but listening to their whole philosophy. Discernment, you can use then to find the aspects of another person's perspective and see if it lines up with your own. And it's not always going to, because life is variable, and the whole point is to have a unique experience. And so when you're doing research, you're going to come across figures and people that you really like, but eventually they're going to say something that you don't like. They're eventually going to make some claims that maybe you don't see the same way. And I just learned through the years and years of doing this, that if you shut off or shut down someone or a philosophy or something simply because it has a few points that you really disagree with, you really begin to little by little make your world smaller and smaller, because eventually everyone is going to disappoint you. Eventually every single person, even your own parents, are going to say things that will disappoint you, that you won't agree with. And you don't write people off for that. You just use your discernment and say to yourself, when something like that happens, hey, I disagree. Hey, I see it differently. But it doesn't make this person a clown. It doesn't make this person a loser. It doesn't make this person intentionally trying to harm others. It just means they have a differing point. And that's real important if you're going to do this much research, because I don't care. I mean, even Manly P. Hall, he's a guy I'm watching or I'm listening to right now. There's even some things that he says that I don't agree with. There were things that Joseph Campbell would say that I wouldn't always see the same way. It doesn't make Joe a loser. It doesn't make Manly P. Hall a loser. It just means that they have a different perspective. And actually, that's important to integrate into your own life, because the more perspective you have, the larger your world becomes. And that's really what we all as a society, as a human culture, need to be doing right now, is widening and widening and widening our perspective rather than narrowing and narrowing it down, because the world is really an unknown in many ways. Any person who says or thinks that they know what's going on or claim to know what's going on is lying to you. The world is far too large to land on any one philosophy, on any one conclusion, because nobody has enough information to be able to come to that position. And so it's important when you're doing research to cull through the stuff that resonates with you and the stuff that doesn't, leave it. If it resonates, take it. And that's beautiful. That's part of variety. So that's my thoughts on that.
It's a refinement process that we all undergo. And with any luck, if you're doing it right, it leads to wisdom. And the formula for wisdom is interesting. It's basically what you get when you don't get what you want. Yeah. And over the years, I've gathered a lot of wisdom by that definition. Now, it's kind of interesting because, this whole identity crisis that struck in the last, I'd say 8 years or so. It's gotten really extreme now. People don't, they're questioning their gender, it used to be, religion or faith or, just all these different criteria, but now it's down to things that we never questioned before we're questioning. And there's always a viewpoint. There's always a counterpoint or another viewpoint. And what I fear, it's a treasure to have all this information at our fingertips with the internet. But I think what I fear for some is that they just selectively pick out the things they identify with or that they would like to identify with. And out of whole cloth, they build a reality that isn't reflective of reality at all. Mm-hmm. And that maybe would be the pitfall. And I think we're seeing more and more of that because, the pre-interview, and I've mentioned this on the show many times, because it's just got me puzzled. I think if there's a hallmark of our time right now, it's that we can't agree on what reality is anymore. And now we have the introduction of AI to really confuse that question. But that poses some really significant problems for human beings. And I would love your opinion on that and where you think we're headed with it.
Yeah. What we're experiencing right now as a society is a massive existential crisis at the end of the day. That's what's happening. Everybody's ontologies are being utterly destroyed. The process of growth is a process of destruction. They are they are one and the same. And you do not grow without tremendous destruction in your beliefs, in your assumptions, in your own personal physical life, as well as your spiritual life. And that's normal. That's growth. Growth is painful. That's why it's painful, is because you find out things that maybe you don't want to find out. You realize perspectives that maybe you never wanted and you can't unsee. And so what is happening right now is everyone is finding out more and more about the world that they were never told. And they're finding these things out because they're not listening to what they're told anymore. And so therefore an entirely different world is opening up. And what's really interesting is that we are experiencing as a culture the same thing that happened around 100, 200 AD, when society was really re-identifying itself. The trade routes, I talk about this in my next video, but the trade routes had opened up in 0 BC to China. And so you had this incredible influx of foreign thoughts, foreign philosophies that are quote unquote invading the West. And this caused an existential crisis. And on top of that, there were the wars, Rome was falling, and everything is being re-identified. And we as a society are going through the same thing, except it's not that the world is blowing up with nuclear war. It's the war is blowing up with new information, with information that is destroying people's realities. And the entire reason that I wrote my book, the entire reason I started my YouTube page, was that I knew this was coming. I knew and saw that this was coming, because when I realized around 10 years ago that the religion I had been involved with for 40 years of my life was not the final answer, when I realized that, I realized, holy shit, this is going to dramatically affect the United States, because basically the United States is one religion. And if that falls apart, if that crumbles, there's going to be a ton of people who are going to have a massive identity crisis. And I am trying in my work and what I'm doing, I am really directly trying to go after that exact subject matter, which is identity. How does a human being re-identify in a world that no longer fits in the world that they were raised in? And that is a very serious and heavy question. And it doesn't have a simple answer. There is not a single answer that's going to answer that question. And part of the reason why we as a society have been going through what we have been going through is to simply break down the walls of belief, the walls of assumption that have been programmed into the society purposefully by those who intended to hurt us. And so we as a society, as we begin to awaken, we need to realize that the identity complex that we have embraced, whatever religion it is you were raised on, you have to come to a place where you have to begin to release some of the absolutes that you've been hanging on to make sense of the world. And you have to learn to swim in an ocean that you're not used to the water temperature, and you're not used to the view. And the islanders are saying a different language than what you're used to. And it is not an option to not explore. It is not an option to say, I give up, I'm just going to drown. That's not an option. You're going to go on that shore and you're going to integrate your life into the new reality that is upon you. That's the only option. There are no other option that nature is offering, just like it didn't offer any other options back at the turn at 100, 200 AD, when the world was redefining itself. And you had to fall into a new way of living, or you're going to die at that time. And it's the same thing now. You'll get sick. You'll make a poor choice with your lifestyle or whatever, based on bad or false information that you've always relied on or whatever. And you're going to be lost and harmed through that. We each, as individuals, have to take on the responsibility, the huge responsibility of re-identifying. And so that's the point of my book. That's the point of my videos that I'm doing right now on nature, is helping people re-identify themselves through nature, through the natural processes, the natural sacred geometry, the natural nature and landscape that you are in, and identifying yourself through. And if you can identify yourself through nature, see, there's always something there to grasp. There's always something there to bring you love and understanding and appreciation. And the more appreciation, understanding, and love that you have in your life, the less anxiety you'll feel, and the less lost you will feel as your identity crumbles, as your existential understanding crumbles. And I want to be there for those people. I want to be there for those people that want to re-identify outside of the religion they were raised in. So anyway, sorry, that's a long answer, but that's my thoughts on that.
No, I think it's fantastic.
Thank
We
you.
get into the nature of being, and I love that you brought up nature, because I guess one of the, and again, the audience has heard me say this numerous times, because I think it's a point worth making over and over. For the better part of my life, I think most people were concerned with what's right and what's wrong, and making the right decisions accordingly. But right and wrong are so subjective, and they've changed so much over history, that it really seems to be more about balance, which is more about nature, which is more about God. However we want to define God, it seems to express itself most in nature, and I really think it is about balance. But when we were talking about this identity question as it relates to the "we can't agree on reality" statement, there's a whole lot of new language in the vernacular, and it's illustrative. I think of some new concepts that have come to the forefront that have never been at the forefront. Much of which is, before it was, well, I think the government may be lying about that. I mean, nothing really drove that home quite as much as 9/11 for a lot of us. But now the conversation is, well, we're observing them doing that. These are the tools by which they've always done this. Well, for how long have they done this? And then there's disagreements about that, because a lot of people are trying to cling to a certain reality, which those thoughts are not permissive. If I agree with this thing, then my reality crumbles, hence my identity crumbles. So I'm offended at such a deep level that my reaction is violent, and I'm going to go and set fire to a Wendy's or something. I mean, this is the kind of process that has influenced human behavior now to a pretty extraordinary degree in just the last several years. Say the last 8 years or so, we've seen some unprecedented activity on our planet. I mean, we've seen some of the largest protests the world has ever seen. Oddly, they don't really make the mainstream news, which that's
Right.
notable for some and easy to ignore for others. So you're kind of presented with the soft, like, here's the curated reality that's going to be more comfortable for you. And here's the big challenge if you really want the truth. But there's landmines and spikes and things in your way on that path. And we're dividing. We're bifurcating as a people, as it were, it seems. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, that goes back to the crisis, the crisis that we're realizing as society. And the reason why I think that things have been the way that they are. This is where I'm going to separate myself from some folks. I am under the impression that what we are experiencing as far as what is happening in the political sphere and the medical sphere and all these different large spheres is not organic. That it is happening very intentionally, and not with the intention of harming humanity, but with the intention of teaching humanity. It's the same. Think of it this way. If you have a child that just continues to engage in some type of dangerous activity, let's say like they're playing with a razor blade or something, they keep getting into dad's closet and they take his razor blades out and cut themselves. That's obviously a crisis situation. You don't want that happening. But at the same time, if you've disciplined the child multiple times and tried to explain to them, you're going to cut yourself, you're going to cut yourself. Eventually, if the child keeps doing that, they will cut themselves. And they will then learn the lesson that you were trying to teach them. But they did not learn the lesson. And they didn't listen to you, in other words, until they actually harmed themselves. And what we see happening right now is humanity is being allowed to harm itself. It's being allowed to do things that are, like you and I are experiencing, unprecedented. I'm seeing stuff that I've never seen in my life being allowed. That's happening. Yeah. And it's horrendous. And people are being harmed, like good people that are not a part of the destruction, who are the casualties of war. They're not trying to be a problem, but they're caught up in it. And that's the messiness, you see, of this enormous organism called society, called humanity. And you can't turn that society around clean. I talk about this in my video, Dethroning the Psychopaths. I talk about how when you have such a huge metropolis of people and all the good people are intermingled with the folks that are really intentionally trying to do harm, You can't go in there and just handpick out all the good side and handpick out all the bad side without these things intermingling. In other words, it's going to be messy to turn this metropolis around. And this metropolis just so happens to be the entire planet. And so it's going to be messy. It can't be clean. In the same way that my lessons that I've learned in my life have been messy, meaning that I really effed my life up bad. Like I had to do that in order for me to learn the lesson. Now, it didn't mean that when I was effing my life up and totally screwing it up, that there was some type of force that was forcing me to do that or intentionally or whatever. That's just the free will and free choice of my life, which is the process of maturing, and that we all have to go to. That's why we're not stupid like we were when we were 17, 16 years old. And the stupid things and choices that you make as a 16-year-old, you don't make as a 66-year-old, because your entire life has taught you that's a bad idea. And so in the same way, you can hand a 17-year-old $1 million, but that doesn't mean they're going to be financially responsible. They're going to have to go through the pain of becoming broke, losing their money, being stolen from, robbed, all this kind of stuff to find out the real value of money. And so in the same exact way, society, you can't just come in with a magic pill or a magic statement and say, here you go, here's the pixie dust, now everything's going to be better and it's a clean slate and all that kind of stuff. There's no way to do that in an organic situation, meaning a society that's just growing and learning. And so I think personally that what we've been going through for all these number of years, especially in the last 5 years, has been a giant lesson. And the people that are stubborn and the people that refuse to see it are the ones that are still in the process of learning the lesson. Because if you still don't get it, when you look at the world right now, if you still don't get it, that there has been an intentional force to try and harm humanity that is still is essentially through what you're watching happening. This you're going to have to get more sensitive, or you're not going to be able to make that transition like we've been talking about since we talked about the people in 1 BC. You're going to have to make this transition, and that's to me why I have hope right now. People ask me sometimes in my videos, how come you have hope? Because you don't offer any suggestions for what to do. You don't offer any suggestions for what a person can do besides learning. And that's my point is, yes, you have to learn. That's one of the biggest things. One of the toughest things in this whole Great Awakening is the human mind, breaking that down from the brainwashing that has gone on now for hundreds, if not thousands of years. This is intention brainwashing. And that is more difficult to break down than basically anything else on this planet. And that's why it's so bad. That's why it's been so rough. And so by each individual waking up, be a light to your society. Share what you know with others. Share the awareness that you become aware of. When you have a friend who's sick, or when you have a friend who's caught up in a religion, take the things that you have learned, the key points, and lovingly approach them. And do your part to try and share this light that you have become aware of, that is inside of you, that you become aware of. And that is just as essential as the people that are down in the tunnels that are cleaning those out. It's just as important that you awaken your brainwashed mind as the people who are actually down there doing the physical fighting. Both are equally important. And in fact, the larger task is cleaning out the hard drives that have been programmed in all of society. You know,
Right.
that's a tough task. And that's why it's so tough right now.
Well, you brought up two things. One is you said clearing out tunnels. But before that, I think a lot of people, because most people are good people, and they think other people are going to do for unto others as you would yourself, etc. I think a lot of people, their question is, why has this been done to humanity, and who's behind doing it? Like, why? What is going on here? Is there a way to explain that without? Because I know it's a really deep question, and there can be some really, unique answers if we go really deep into this. But what do you say to someone that's just kind of breaking the ice? And I mean, we could go deeper into this, but how do you answer that question? Who is this? What are these entities?
I would go back quite a bit in history to start that conversation, and I would never begin to answer that question unless I knew I had some time to talk with them, because if you get cut off halfway through, it's not going to work. So I would make sure that there was a time and setting to make sure to have some time to answer that question. It's kind of, you know, when you ask someone what they believe, say religiously, it's going to be very hard for them to define that very quickly. It's because it's a part of their life. What they believe religiously is an integration of all their friendships, their family, everything, their day. And so it's not an easy answer. So the first thing I would do when someone says, okay, you know, what's the problem here, is I would go back quite a ways, and I would begin to show that history, as we have been shown it, is a lie, and it has been intentionally been a lie. And the wars that have been basically nonstop since the fall of Rome have been intentional. And I would talk about some of that, and I would go into understanding that there has been a concerted effort by a small group of people to remain in control, to control all of society. And you can get someone to relate to this in the same way that you would with business. If you take a businessman who is all about money and is all about growing his business and he's really greedy and he doesn't have a whole lot of morals, and he just, whatever it takes to make the money, he's going to do it, right? Well, imagine if a person like that, a flavor like that, that's in a leadership position. And if you look at the kings that have, and the monarchs that have ruled societies all the way back to Caligula, you can find a thread that shows basically we've always been under a corrupt monarchy. We've always been under a corrupt leadership. And that's easy to see. I mean, you can just look at the Senate in Rome. You can just look at the politics of today and look at the lies, and they'll say the economy is one way and you'll see that it's another. And you can begin to see through patterns. That's the way you get people to understand, is showing them consistent patterns. And then once you have gotten them to grasp that the world that they're living in is not as nice, and it's the government is not here to make you feel better. It's not here to improve your life. It's not here to make you wealthier. It's not here to, and any common person will be able to see that it is not. You then will be able to say, okay, well, if the entire government is of that substance, if the entire government seems to be focused on war, on taking money from you, on making you sick, on giving you bad solutions, right? Well, they're obviously all in unity in what they're saying and doing. So there must be some kind of force that's uniting them. And when you begin to, like I'm doing right now, little by little, piece by piece, you can then begin to whittle it down to showing them. And this is the great thing that will be so hard to show them. But you'll be able to eventually show them that the world is a farm, and that human beings are cattle, and that the entire system has been set up to exploit people religiously, politically, financially. Every single aspect of your life has been set up to take from you, to usurp your world. And it's not any person who comes to you and asks the question, what's wrong here, will be sensitive enough to follow you at that level. You've not gone into anything too conspiratorial in the way that I've just described, of breaking the ice of someone. And then a great thing to do, honestly, and I'm not trying to self-promote myself here, but you can send them the video. If they're willing to listen to that, you can send them to one of my videos, like God Eaters 1, God Eaters 2, and it will begin to very intricately, delicately, through real evidence and, history, begin to show the pattern that you've just elucidated to them as you've been speaking to them. But it's a process. That's the key thing. All of my family, none of my family buy into any of the stuff that I'm spending my life describing right now. My father, he doesn't buy any of this conspiracy stuff. So people are not alone. Most people who go into this and discover that the world isn't what you understood will find that most of the people they hang out with, their friends and their family, will not see it at this level. And so it's okay. It's one of the beauties of understanding these things early on, is that you can start to grasp these things before the rest of society has been able to grasp it themselves. And so you have a much cleaner view, because you're not being influenced by tons and tons of people who have all come up with a different idea. And so people like me and you guys and others who started this quite a while ago, there's a perspective there that they don't have yet. And you, with your experience are going to have to use your wisdom and how you understand your relationship with him to know how you're going to be able to break the ice, because it's going to be something that's going to take time, and it's going to have to be gentle. People don't listen to a loud voice. They don't listen to threat. They're not going to respond to you if you say, well, if you don't believe this, then you're going to hell. That's not a way to win a person over. And so that's why you need to come into this whole thing, like you had asked, very gently, very methodically, and use what you know. Stay in subjects that you know, because people see instantly if you're walking in the grounds that you're unfamiliar with, and if they sense that you're BSing them, they'll shut you off. So make sure and stay in subjects that you are well familiar with. And when they bring up stuff you don't know, say you don't know, because they'll respect that a lot more than you're trying to fumble and tap dance through something that you don't know anything about. So anyway, I don't want to get sidetracked, but that's what I think.
Thank you.
No, I mean, it just makes me think that the price that we pay to live in civilization has always included this incremental acquiescence to an imbalance, to the absence of truth. Yes. That's where the curation of our reality comes from, is over time. Now we're so far out of whack and out of balance that I think we've reached the point where we recognize this imbalance. None of these things that we've built in the name of civilization are stable any longer. It really truly is a house of cards. We are watching parts of it crumble. And, I think it's thrusting a lot of people into the direction of, well, where do we find the balance? And truth, it has a price. It's spent culturally. It has a price. Well, there's some quote and it says everybody's a patriot in the end, but nobody wants to be a patriot. I'm paraphrasing horribly, but nobody wants to be a patriot when it costs them something. Right. There's a real cost to this. It's going to cost you friends and family and so on and so forth. So it takes a certain degree of conviction to pursue this.
Well, my God, yes. I mean, I've lost basically all my friends. I hardly talk to my family anymore. And it's not that I don't love these people. It's just we've become so diabolically separate as far as perspective of the world is concerned that it's hard to find common ground. And you feel very, very alienated from people that you were once very close to and loved dearly. But you're unwilling to compromise because in your heart, you're convicted. And so you have to honor that, because no one wants to be a hypocrite, which means that you're a coward. And so anyone who would engage in this kind of activity can't be cowardly, because it is going to cost you. Like I said, beginning of this thing, growth is a destructive process. Yeah. You do not grow without destruction. So if you think you're going to wake up to this great awakening and it's going to be this awesome primrose path you're on, and all your friends are going to join around you and you guys are going to go get them and it's going to be awesome. My friend, it's not. It's costly. I have spent, in all seriousness, I have cried many a night over what this has cost me to find this stuff out. And it's one of the reasons why I started to do what I was doing. Because, and this is, okay, I'll just give a brief synopsis. I started doing what I was doing because I didn't know how to do it. One of the reasons why Parsifal, when he was given the test of going to the castle where the Grail was, the reason why he failed the first test is because he never asked King Amfortas why he was sick. And because he didn't ask why he was sick, and he listened to what his mother had told him, which was, do as you're told. Don't ask any questions. Stay quiet. This is how you teach a child so they don't get into trouble. And he had taken these youthful, good ideas from his mother that are not good ideas as an adult and carried that into his adulthood. And so when he went and he was in front of the king, because he had earned the merit, because he was an authentic person, he stayed quiet. He obeyed. He stayed quiet. He didn't ask questions. He kept his mouth shut. And he just simply went back to his chambers after dinner, went to bed. And the next day he was kicked out of the castle because he had spoiled his opportunity, because he was obedient. And because he was obedient, that cost him the ability to save the kingdom, save the king, save the Grail, discover the Grail. And so in this same light, you have to walk into this thing. You have to walk into this thing aware. And the reason I started my video stuff was because I was walking into it innocently, because I didn't know how to do it. And I looked at society and I said, what does society need? What is the problem here? I tried to do what Parsifal failed at doing, which was ask, what is the problem? And the answer I got back was, we are in an identity crisis. That's what the big problem is. Everyone is going to lose their existential understanding, and they're going to fall into an identity crisis. And so that's exactly why I started doing what I was doing, to try and be a light as far as identity is concerned. Because yes, these people, folks that do this, it's a bloodbath. It's terrible, meaning it's costly. And I'm slowly but surely trying to rebuild these relationships that I've lost, but it's not because I've done harmful things or anything. It's simply because my perspective is so much larger than it was. And so it's a painful process. So it's okay. Don't lose hope, but it is painful. That is what we're going through right now. And there are no easy or quick answers for what is happening.
Well, and obedience, especially without any kind of alignment, is not a virtue.
Exactly.
And so, pointing that out as a failure, I think, is really valuable. I think rarely is obedience virtuous. Disobedience is frequently virtuous.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And see, here's a great example. This is where you learn discernment. Because if a person heard you say that, they would say, wait a minute, disobedience, you're saying disobedience is a good idea. What do you mean saying disobedience? That's bad. That's simple. No, use your discernment. There are times in your life when you absolutely should be disobedient. And there are times in your life when you absolutely should be obedient. And it's your discernment that's going to determine that. And the more knowledge you have, the more wisdom you have, the more life experience you have, the better your discernment. And the better you'll be able to decipher. Life isn't clean and simple. It's not cut and dry. It's not, this is good and this is evil, done. It's not absolutes like that. It's very gray. It's very marginal. And so you have to learn to swim in that kind of ocean that is not an absolute space. That's one of the things that religion does to people, is it makes them think that the world, that experience, that God is an absolute, and it's not that way. And you will disorient and disillusion yourself living under those kind of assumptions. And so it's painful for the person who is like that to find out, damn it, I'm going to have to be more discerning. I'm going to have to take more ownership and responsibility for the choices that I make. I'm going to have to think more deeply about the people that I listen to. I'm going to have to consider more deeply what I believe, what I look to for answers, what I look to myself for answers. These kinds of things have to all be underneath this enormous wave or curtain of discernment. And that's what has to develop to make sense when somebody says obedience is not a virtue. A discerning person will hear that and say, absolutely true. An adolescent will hear that and say, well, that's not what mom told me. That's not what dad told me. You know what I'm saying? And we have to be adults here. We have to be responsible here in this great awakening.
Well, it's like, the whole, the argument for governance is born out of the statement that man cannot govern himself. And what a pathetic state that we cannot govern. Now, I'm not saying that man has demonstrated that he can govern himself, not on scale. What I'm saying is we still have a problem with that. And but I think people instead, they have the problem that that's a call to take on a lot more responsibility than we're comfortable with.
Yes, and that hurts. Responsibility hurts. It's painful. It's painful.
Yeah.
But when I recently, in regards to responsibility, I had two little dogs that I loved to death. Two little white Westies. We had them for about 10, 12 years, and eventually had to realize when they finally passed away, do I want to take on the responsibility again of that? Because having pets is an enormous responsibility, and it takes your time. It takes energy, it takes money, and all this kind of stuff. And in the same way, if you're going to go out and awaken, it's going to take your time. It's going to take your friendships. It's going to probably take money. It might cost you your job. It cost me my job. Literally, when I awoke and found out that religion, what I thought it was, I had to leave my job because I'm not a hypocrite and I'm not a coward. And I wasn't about to participate in something that I didn't stand behind and act like, hey, this is all fine and dandy. I'm okay with this. I'm a fool at that point. I am a menace to society at that point. And so taking on responsibility will be costly to you. This great awakening is not going to be comfortable for anybody. If you think it's going to be this great, wonderful thing, it's going to be totally awesome and feel great. It's not like that. It's going to be a growing time. You'll be the better for it. You'll love your life all the more as you go through it, but it's going to be a trying time. And that's what's going to make life so worth living, is that you endured through it, in that you learned, you became, you adjusted, you were responsible and did not cower from the challenge that was put in front of you. And that's what we all need to be doing. We need to be putting our one step in front of the other and participating in this, and not being cowardly and just sitting back and just saying, okay, they'll take care of it, it's going to be okay. You can't do that. You can't do that. You're going to have to participate, and it's going to hurt, but that's okay.
Right. Well, I just want to say something real quick. First of all, not that it's a competition, but I want to congratulate you on surpassing your father's YouTube channel, that more people are now following you. But someone had asked, and I know people can watch your other videos, and they can watch our interview that we did with you a little over a month ago about your background. And I in our last interview, you let people know that you went through cancer, and you also let them know that your family, your father, same name, and your siblings, they were part of a church and a belief. Could you just give the viewers just a little bit of what that was, so they can have, for anyone that may not be familiar with your background?
Sure.
So please.
Okay. Sure, absolutely. Okay. So I was raised in a Christian family, staunch Christian, very conservative, evangelical Christian family. My father is a gifted expositor. He went to Dallas Theological Seminary in the 50s. And then, like any student that graduates from seminary, he served at a number of churches. And then eventually he took the lead pastor role of a church called First Evangelical Free Church in Fullerton, California. It was on Malvern Avenue when I was a boy. And this was when I wasn't even born, actually, when he accepted. And then we moved there. We moved to Southern California, where the church was, in 1971. So I was about 6 months old. I was born in June, so it was I wasn't even one yet. And so I was raised in the same house, in the same city, same everything, for about 20 years in Southern California, in Fullerton, actually, near Brea, Anaheim, Whittier, La Mirada. These would all be cities that constellate Fullerton, where I grew up. Okay, so that gives you kind of a setting. And so then at that time, around 1976, up until that point, my mother had been collecting letters from people who had sent in requests that my father broadcast his sermons on the radio, because they couldn't come to Southern California to see him speak. And so they wanted to hear him speak, but they had no way. And this is in the 70s. So there's no internet. There's no, none of the stuff we have now. It was just radio. And so my mom, when she eventually got to 2 shoeboxes full of letters of people who were requesting my father's sermons be broadcast, she took those shoeboxes and she went to a place called the Lockman Foundation, which I don't think they exist anymore, but they were right there in Fullerton. And she posted them. And my father was totally against this. He did not want to be on the radio. He did not. My father, he's a very introverted guy, believe it or not. And he doesn't like advertising himself. He doesn't like promoting himself. He doesn't like any of that stuff that typically people who like being in the spotlight enjoy. My father's not like that at all. I'm very much like that, like him also in that way, and that I don't like the spotlight. I don't like being something special or anything like that. My father's the same way. And so when mom said to him, hey, we've got all these people that are writing that they want to hear your sermons, my dad's like, no, they don't. Just don't worry about that. Just, they're just nice people. They don't want to hear anything else. And so mom, on her own accord, she went down and she talked to this broadcasting ministry there in Fullerton. And they decided to go ahead and broadcast my father. Okay. That was about 1975. It exploded. I mean, it just, the response from people to my father's words when he preached was incredible. And that little church there on Malvern, it could hold, I think when we started there, it could hold a few hundred people. And by the time around 1976, 77 came around, Dad was running 3 services in the morning and 2 services at night, and people were sitting in the aisles and standing outside the doors. I mean, it was like a revival every single Sunday. There were so many people. It was incredible. And so he was then approached to write books because they people could not get enough of him. And so He wrote his first book called For Those Who Hurt. That was in 1975. And he followed that up with a book called Second Wind, another book called Killing Giants and Pulling Thorns. But the book that really launched everything was a book called Improving Your Serve. And that came out around 1979, 1980, 1978, right around in there. And that blew, I mean, the only Christian evangelical pastor in the world that could surpass my father's numbers was Billy Graham. That he was the only guy that I can think of that ever was on the level of my father. So eventually he kept writing books, and then all through the 80s, they built an empire called Insight for Living, which is a radio ministry that now my sister is the president of. My sister Carissa. I have 3 siblings: an older brother Kurt, an older brother Carissa, an older sister Colleen, and me. And so Carissa's now the president. My mom has retired, and my father, he's just preaching on Sundays. But this upbringing that I experienced was an incredible preparation, and you're not going to believe where this is going, but it was an incredible preparation for what is happening right now in the Great Awakening, and I'll explain that. As I was growing up, what I didn't know, because I'm just a child, this is ages 5 through 15. What I didn't know is that my reality was nothing like anyone else's reality. For instance, we would go to a restaurant, and every person in the restaurant would know my father. We'd have people that would walk up to the table and say, Chuck, I've heard you on the ministry. You've meant so much to me. I can't believe that you're sitting here. It's so nice to meet you. They'll bring books to my father to sign the whole thing. And so this became normalcy for me. When we would go any department store, anywhere in Fullerton, people would see him, walk up to him, say, hello, Chuck. I heard your voice. I know this voice. I've listened to your ministry. My parents have been listening to you for years, on and on it goes. So what was normal to me was this completely abnormal reality to everyone else. And so this really caused an incredible schism in my head, because when I left the house and I left the influence and power that my father carried and that my family carried, I entered into a world that doesn't give a rat's ass about me. And I had been in a situation where everywhere we went, people cared. Everywhere we went, there's attention. Everywhere we went, people know us. And all of a sudden, I'm thrust into this world whereby I'm not privileged. And that really ill prepared me for life, because it set up ideas in my head that weren't reality, that weren't true. And it also became a stigma between me and my friendships, because I'm living in a world that they aren't. And so what are my problems are frivolous to them, because they're in a much harsher world than the privileged world that I was in with my father. And so all of these stigmas, all of these non-realities built up around me that I didn't know existed. And when I got cancer in, that was in 2012, when I was contracted with cancer, it thrust me into an alternate world, an alternate reality that showed me, as I left the Christian world, as I left this power world that I had been in my whole life, and I turned around and looked, I realized I've been living in a false reality. This is why people have been treating me the way that they do. This is why people act the way that they do when I've been around them. Now I'm starting to understand why it was like that, because I was in this power family. And so I realized at that point, I am out of touch. I can't relate with anyone. And so that was one of the biggest reasons why I left the church where I was serving with my father, was because as long as I was serving there, I was underneath his umbrella of influence, his umbrella of power, his umbrella of exposure. Not that Dad's doing anything bad. It's just naturally like that, because he's a king in a kingdom. In the Christian world, my father is the king, or he's one of them. He's one of the very top echelon figures in the Christian world. And so becoming aware of that was awesome preparation for when I started realizing that actually the whole world is nothing like I think it is. Not only have I been living in this non-reality privileged situation, but the whole world has been living in this horror situation. And so because I had to leave Christianity, and I had to leave this power world and everything that my father was a part of, it was much easier for me when I realized that the world wasn't what I thought it was, for me to abandon that also. abandon those friendships, abandon all of the relationships that had held me in that space and brought me to that space. And so fortunately for me, I was able to make an easier transition in realizing that the world is corrupt as it is and accepting that and not feeling like it has to change, but realizing I'm going to have to change my perspective. I'm going to have to change how I understand things, because that's the mature and responsible thing to do. And that's why I left the church, because the responsible thing to do is to not be a part of something that you don't believe in, to not be a part of something and support something that you don't think is a good thing. And these are wonderful life lessons that we all are going to learn as we transition in this great awakening. So yeah, it's a really unique situation for me. And yes, my family has had a huge influence on me. And that's why when folks look me up on YouTube, they find my father and they find Insight for Living. It's because my father has been the biggest thing in Christianity since basically the mid 70s. And just now, as the Great Awakening is taking hold, this is really when I think we're reaching the point now where everyone has seen the political side, everyone has seen the medical side, everyone has seen the agricultural side, everyone is seeing the geo side. Now everyone is beginning to see the religious side. And people are starting to see that even in the same way that all these other realms have been lies, so also has the religious spectrum been built upon lies. And so I hope that answers your question.
Well, no, thank you, because it does set the foundation. You're truly in a unique situation, and I mean, I imagine it's hard to have deep conversations on the subject matter with any of your family, because it's too. And Scott was mentioning this. What is reality? And so those are two completely different perspectives. And obviously, if people are watching the show and they relate to this, they're starting to see the matrix break down. But your willingness to confront something, which is the amount of indoctrination and brainwashing that you were subject to your entire life is pretty profound.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's been really difficult. And the one real advantage I have is that I really understand, and honestly, I really understand what it's like to be on the other side of this thing, to be totally 100% entrenched in a belief system. It doesn't have to be Christianity. I understand what it's like to be entrenched in a system of belief. And I'm telling you, I don't know if I could have broken out without cancer, without psychedelic medicines. I don't know if I could have broken down the structures that are in place. And this is something of just a word of encouragement for people. It's okay if your mom and dad, your friends, family, whatever, just simply can't see your perspective. Love them anyway. It doesn't matter. Love them anyway. It's okay if they don't get the perspective that you do. Don't get frustrated. Don't get annoyed. It's easy to feel that way and get frustrated, but it's okay. It is so hard to break out of brainwashing. It is so hard to break out of being indoctrinated. I can't even begin to tell you. And a conversation isn't going to do it. A person finds these things on their own. A conversation helps. Perspective helps. But a person, they themselves must lead themselves to the trough. They have to drink the water on their own. You cannot force them. This is not something, getting out of indoctrination is not something that's forced. It is something that happens over time. It's a process. And so simply be a light to them. Be a shining light of love and acceptance. Be a shining light, rather than, if they don't believe your flat or round earth theory, rather than taking a side, try and be a shining light just in how you understand things, but don't judge them if they disagree with you. It's okay if they do. That's fine. It's fine. They'll disagree with you with medical. There's a better example is my father and I have strong disagreement when it comes to medicine. And so when I had cancer and I rejected all Western medicine doctors, my dad had a really, really bad time with that. And I understand it. It's okay. It's okay. But that's what's going to happen right now. You're going to have really strong disagreement with people that don't see things as clearly as you do. The best thing you can do for them is love them. What I try to do on my channel, when I'm approached by someone who comes in like gangbusters and they're saying I'm going to go to hell and I'm a terrible person and I'm leading people away from Jesus and all this kind of stuff, I always just try and not try and explain, not try and argue, but just say, hey, I hear you. Here's some videos. that maybe will open up your perspective a bit. And I try and avoid getting into any kind of word salad with them, or excuse me, word argument with them, because you're never going to get anywhere like that. So it's a process. It's going to take time, and people just need to be patient and understand. In the same way it was hard for you to change, it's just the same way with others. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you overcame something very hard. That was cancer. And it brings me to the thought of, hard men create good times. Good times create weak men. Weak men create bad times, and the cycle repeats and repeats. But we have, civilization taking us to new degrees of comfort. And the more comfortable you are, the less likely you are to plunge into the cold water. Even though it's going to be invigorating, maybe even life-changing, it's a discomfort that many people will protect. They'll make up all kinds of stories about the water being evil or whatever it might be, just to avoid the discomfort, because of their attachment to comfort and fear. And I think it's because we're not used to doing hard things anymore. When you consider, like, the foundation of this country is a good example, because people were, they were getting in wagons and crossing the country and facing pretty much imminent death. Not everybody's going to make it. There's rattlesnakes and Indians and weather and,
yes,
starvation and every manner of horror ahead of you. And yet these people wanted the freedom of that experience so much, they were willing to endure all of that. And now, where on the planet is anybody enduring that willingly?
Yeah, it's an enormous question. And one of the things that I've always found, well, what I like to say is, I find it amazing how hard the sinner will fight to stay a sinner. And the reason the sinner fights to stay a sinner is because it's too scary to enter a world that doesn't have any sin, that doesn't understand that there isn't sin, that it's actually a process of learning, that and it's an entirely different way of taking apart evil. And so that's one of the things I'm trying to do on my site, is trying to take apart evil stigmas in how we understand the world in such a way that we realize that there is negative, that there is horror, that there is evil, but understanding that that is simply part and parcel of the manifestation of God. You're going to have a polar world when you enter into 3D from the eternal world. When you go from an eternal world to a temporal world, the realities in that temporal world are different than the realities of the eternal world. And so it's easy to mistake the way that things are in this polar reality we're in as something that they're not. And this is what I really get into in my nature video part 2, is realizing that, it's the impurities that bring color and beauty to the world. And it's simply a matter of transforming vice into virtue. That's the key. So it's not a matter of atonement. It's a matter of realizing the polarities, not choosing a side. It's a very fine line. This gets again into discernment and understanding the way you begin to take apart the world isn't through this polar idea, but through this contrasting idea, not through this good and evil absolute, but this understanding that these two, good and evil, are simply part and parcel of the manifesting of eternity. Time and temporality are just simply part and parcel of living in a material reality that we're in, a 3D world that we're in. And so in order to find understanding, you have to stop taking apart the world in terms of sin and atonement. And you have to start understanding it in the terms of light and dark. That it doesn't, that you're not going to, in other words, you're not going to existentially take your behaviors with you as sin and be judged for them at death. That's an adolescent way of handling the evil problem. A much more mature way of handling the evil problem is understanding that evil is part and parcel of a 3D world, of a 3D modality that we're in. And you simply have to learn to tread in that water and change that which would cause you vice into that which becomes your virtue. And so that which, it's the quote that Campbell uses, where you stumble is where your treasure lies. And so I found that out in my own life when I stumbled upon the idea that the religion I was in wasn't ultimate truth. And so that caused me to stumble. It was like, wait a minute, that can't be right. I mean, I've been under this same system of belief for 40 years. All my friends agree that it's right. All the books I read say that it's right. My pastor says that it's right. What's the problem? And so that's exactly the problem, is that you're not seeing the world clearly enough when you accept it on such a simple term. It's much more deep than that. And it's part of the stuff I'm covering in my next part 3 video is this Hermeticism thing that was going on around 100 AD. It's fine. Meaning you have to, that's the wrong word. It's detailed. It's bespoke. And so you're going to have to learn to adjust to what is coming in front of you rather than just defaulting to what you've always assumed. And that is when we really get into some complicated stuff as far as this whole good and evil problem and what is actually causing such evil in this world. And how can you take a side by saying there has to be evil, a part of good? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. The evil has to be vanquished. And you have to work through these kind of short-sighted understandings of the situation and realize there's always going to be evil in the universe. There's always going to be darkness in the universe. That is called material reality. That is part and parcel of it. So you're going to have to use a more complicated ontology to understand it. You're not going to be able to cut and paste something from 2,000 years ago with the mentality of the people that were around in 5,000 BC. They don't have the mindset that you do now. It was a much smaller mindset back then than it is now. And so we understand so much more. We have to adapt rather than defaulting to what they used to do as far as good and evil is concerned with sin and atonement. That's an old school way of handling this existential problem. And with the perspectives we now have with all the different religions and all the different belief systems and all the different philosophies that this world has gone through for thousands of years, we're going to have to integrate portions of each to find understanding, because each one has some parts that are really true and awesome. Like Buddhism has some great parts. Christianity has some great parts. Hinduism has some great parts. Atheism has some great parts. They all have unique parts. And using your discernment, you can then open your world to a larger reality than any one of those. And at that point, you're now taking steps to get out of the indoctrination that you've always been stuck within, if that makes sense.
Makes a lot of sense. It makes me think about the difficulty associated with embracing the contrast. You know, we have an adversity to adversity, but it is that adversity that gives us our character, and that gives life its depth and its richness. Without it, I think life would be a hell of its own, a very unusual hell of its own. Right.
Be very thin. And this is why you don't like to be around people that have been privileged their whole life, because they're not in reality. They're annoying because they're so outside of reality. They haven't had it hard enough. I mean, I love meeting people who have been through hell, because you can relate with them on the levels that they went through hell if you yourself have also gone through hell. And that brings depth to the relationship. It brings depth to life. In other words, we need these challenges. We need the impurities in order to make life the beauty that it is. That's part of the challenge of growing. And so trying to create a world where there is no evil, that evil is totally vanquished and there's just Jesus, or there's just Christianity, there's just God. You don't understand that that's not reality. That's just light. There's also darkness. In order to see the light, there must be darkness, and vice versa. This is just part and parcel of reality. And we as a society have been so dumbed down and so golf balled in our mentality that we don't realize that the world is much larger than the finite absolute world that has been programmed into us. And so therefore it becomes much more beautiful when you take on the responsible approach. And the responsible approach is, I'm going to look differently at good and evil. I'm going to look differently at light and dark. And I'm going to understand these things from a much deeper perspective from just a sin and atonement. One side must win over the other and battle each other out for a final conclusion. Don't do that. So that's kind of how I land with that kind of stuff. Is it's deeper than you think. Life is not that simple. It's much more complicated than it was when you were a little kindergartner. So stop using the solutions you used as a kindergartner to answer your concerns as a 20, 30, 40 adult, whatever. You know what I'm saying? It's just like that with religion.
Well, yeah. I mean, in the act of appreciating the contrast, you tend to neutralize, the negative aspects of the evil. You know, I mean,
Exactly.
I can't think of a better way to piss the devil off than to thank him for the contrast he provides. You know,
Exactly. Get above it.
Sure.
So where do you, okay, so let's say humanity is aware of the depths of evil, because I've said this before on the show. I just thought, okay, we'd been through the world wars, the Bible lets us know things about our world, and that was then, this is now, and we've handled that, and now we're finally living in a world that we've realized this stuff. And boy, was I far from reality. I had no idea till a lot of this great awakening. And then, obviously a lot of the artists that I've looked at, and the Illuminati and all their symbolism, I mean, it's right there. If they look for it, it's right there. So I guess my question is, if we're fully aware that this is real, and then what they do to children, and why some of these behaviors, pedophilia is so prevalent, etc. This is, I guess I'm partly answering the question I was asking about how dark this gets. What kind of world do you envision if everyone is able to then see that the evil exists, yet they're aware of it now, so that they can look out for children and say, okay, careful, because there are really dark people out there. But if everyone's aware of it and they just don't poo-poo it, I'll make posts on Facebook or whatever about human trafficking, and most people don't really realize how real that is, and how widespread it is. So what do you see in a world that still has the evil, yet people are much more aware of it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would approach it in the same way that you would approach your immune system. You detox, and you live your life constantly in the terms of detoxing, constantly in the terms of health. And so it's a lifestyle, in other words. And so in the same way you are with your immune system, in knowing that, there's diseases out there. You're constantly exposed to sickness. You're constantly exposed to all these things that really want to harm you, that are around in the air everywhere. So you do what is necessary to prepare your body physically. So you exercise, you eat organic foods, you cook at home for the most part. You don't take in toxic meals like a lot of sugar, a lot of alcohol, these kind of things. Nothing wrong with that stuff in smaller portions, but you don't make it a lifestyle. And by doing this, you're living in the real world. You have sugar from time to time. You have alcohol from time to time. You have junk food from time to time. It happens. That's life. And in the same way, you make mistakes in your life. You do evil things from time to time. It happens. It's life. You don't want to. You want to live a life that is always above reproach if you can. You always want to make the best decision possible for not only yourself, but for those around you. And this is something that just simply comes out of you the more aware and the more appreciative you become. It's not something that's put in by directive. And that's the big change that's coming in the future. Is we have been a society that has been raised like children. So you're told what medicine to take, you're told what God to believe, you're told what government to follow, you're told what car to drive, you're told what electricity to use. You're being raised like a child. And that all has to stop. People must take self-responsibility. The world we're walking into is a self-response world. It is not a world where you are being spoon-fed every single thing you're supposed to believe, exactly what happens when you die and go to heaven or hell, exactly what you should do, this, that, and the other. That as long, it's one of the worst, folks probably won't like this, but one of the worst quotes you can say is, Jesus, take the wheel. That's basically saying, I don't want to be responsible, I'm handing the responsibility off. We have to stop that kind of thinking. We have to stop that kind of action that is so much like a child. That's what a child does. And the world that we're going to is a world that is self-responsible. And people are not being programmed. They are finding out themselves and doing the work themselves to find out the world, which is exactly what they were doing way back in the day, before there was institutionalized medicine, before there was institutionalized government, before there was institutionalized everything. This is what people did. You spent your day, your time learning about nature, learning about yourself, learning what's good to eat, what's not, exercising, taking care of yourself mentally. I mean, it's a full-time job just staying healthy and being who you are. And so the world that we're walking into is going to be much less directed. Just This is what you guys need to believe in. This is what you guys need to be buying. This is, that whole mentality needs to just stop. And the way that we instigate that is by each person thinking for themselves, by disobeying, and by discovering for yourself, what existential philosophy you're going to take on for yourself. Not listening to just what the pastor says, what the governor says, what your doctor says. Make your own choices. And that's the world we're going into. And so that's a responsible world. So I see a lot more people researching. I see a lot more people spending more time in their health and taking care of themselves rather than just thinking they can take a pill to fight off whatever it is their concern is, and being more proactive. We haven't been proactive. Is one of the reasons why we've been a controlled society, is because we've always been reactive and simply doing as told. We have to be proactive, and we tell the society, we tell the governance, this is the way it's going to be. You're not going to tell me those things. And so that is where I think we're headed towards a totally different type of person, a totally different type of friendship and reality. Your friendships will change, your family relationships will change, because everybody's going to take this step up in responsibility. And so people are not going to be concerning themselves with the BS that media is putting out, that false institutions put out. People won't be working with that anymore. They'll be centered on their own understanding and their own wisdom. That's where I think things are going.
Wow.
You look at the marketing budget for big pharma, it's insane. Just driving in a car, the billboards are, there's something to do with healthcare. And I live pretty much commercial free, but whenever I'm, I was dog sitting recently, and I endured some commercials, and it's like there's this obsession with healthcare, and I don't think it's on the part of the consumer. I think it's on the part of the people selling it. They have to continually send this message over and over and over. Mm-hmm. It's not too hard to sell the truth. Well, I guess that's not entirely true, is it? But
well, they just shove it down people's throats, and then they put fear behind it, so then people follow it. I mean, when you're given all kinds of threats, I mean, when you're told, if you don't take this particular substance, you are going to die. If you're told that by all your government, by your doctor, by everyone, I mean, what kind of a world are you living in? And you have to really begin to wonder, why are they treating us like this? And the reason why they're treating us like this is because we've accepted it. It's because we've done as told. And that's simply because we've been held in this incredibly small reality. And again, we're saying the same thing over and over again, but we have to break out of that reality. That is really key. And that is why this whole Great Awakening thing is not going to get out of the crisis that we're in now until more people awaken. That is what is absolutely essential. Everyone is looking for the ending day. The ending day will be determined as society wakes up. So do your part, wake up yourself, and be a light to others to wake up. And that will bring this to a close all the more quickly by being responsible, Yeah,
and grow the fuck up. It's the problem is, that was harsh, but it was meant to be. We've been infantilized incrementally my whole life, but it's to such an astonishing degree that high school students are asking for coloring books and safe spaces, and maybe in some cases a litter box in a classroom. I mean,
I have heard of
we're
that,
so
yes.
infantilized. Adults don't act like adults. No, but there is no adult in the room, and and we look to governance or whatever for someone to be an adult. Well, they're not being adults either. No one is.
No.
We know where that leads, right?
Yeah.
The fall of civilization. So
yeah, and we have to grow as a society. And the way it used to happen in the past was cataclysms. And this is how societies grew and developed. I mean, one of the reasons why Greece was as beautiful and as Rome was as beautiful as it was because these were cultured societies that had been developing. And even though they had been destroying themselves over and over again, they still were developing in thought and process. And it was really the stigma of religion that stopped the development. I mean, that's why we had the Dark Ages for 1,500 years, because all development stopped around 325. And so the reason why society was in a dark age was because Everything was outside of their religion. They were completely in the dark as to what reality was, who they were, who God is. And you can see that this is a great way to show people reality. You can see that again happening now, a systematic working to disillusion people, to actually cause youth to think they're a bird, to identify as a monkey, to start these crazy, nutty ideas. And this is just what begins to happen when the society begins to break down from the dead end that it has been at for so long. It just starts to literally get totally nutty. And so we are in the process right now of ridding of the nuttiness. And in order to do that, it's going to get even more nutty, because that's the only way you're going to get past what people are seeing. And they will see how crazy it's gotten and step back finally and say, wait a minute, this is messed up that the borders have been open for years and years now.
Right.
Like this is whack. Like this is seriously bad for the society. Even if you were wanted that to happen, you now have to look at that and say, wait a minute, this can't be a good thing. And that's why it's been going on the way that it has, is that it has to wake up even the people that thought it was a good idea to have absolutely no borders. That's a person who's very disillusioned. That's a person that's been programmed. That's a person that isn't aware of how a society actually functions in a functioning sense. So yeah, we have to wake up.
You know, the border is a great example. It's shocking that we've tolerated this for so long.
Yes.
You know, it wasn't long ago that we were upset about 3% tax. We threw all the tea in the harbor. You know, we're very different people now. And you know, I think that was born out of apathy, but now it's almost out of convenience that it persists.
And what's the quote about things are going to get weirder and weirder?
Oh, Terrence McKenna. Yeah, things are
Thank
going to keep getting weirder and weirder until we start talking about it.
Yeah, and he was right. The funny thing is, he was saying that in the 80s, 70s. You know,
nuttiness. That's what we need.
If you look at I listen to Alan Watts now, and some of his talks are from the 60s, and I'm like, this guy could have said that exact speech yesterday, and he would have been just as relevant yesterday as he was 50 years ago. I mean, these guys understood. That's something to behold there. Seriously.
Yeah, in some ways, even more relevant. It's crazy because they could foresee a time like that. I mean, look at even Orwell, you know, and how shockingly
1984 is insane. Yes.
Yeah, he's so shockingly on it with that. It's amazing. Or the movie Idiocracy. I mean, no one knew that was a documentary. You know, it's
same with The Matrix.
Yeah, definitely.
Same thing. I mean, nobody. I mean, when I first saw The Matrix when it came out, I didn't realize that it was literally a documentary. It is that the world is that nutty. It's that whack. And yes, we are a cattled society. I mean, when they showed that gal drinking the drink and it was being made from the bodies that they were taking out there, and I saw that when I saw that for the first time, I thought, oh, that's just crazy. And when you realize that that is actually a real thing called natural flavoring that's put in all our foods, when you realize that that's a real thing, you can't believe it. It's absolutely shocking. I mean, it's almost too much to take. And it takes a long time to be able to swallow that kind of information, because it is real. It is that bad. It is that bad. We've become that usurped as a society. We've been under that kind of control. So I think there'll be enormous changes, to kind of harken back to what you're asking, what life would be like. I think when you take out that level of evil that is preying upon the world, and you return it back to sort of this more normal level of evil, which is just the everyday stuff that you experience in life of good and bad choices. When you take out this whole enormous institution whose entire premise and purpose was to take over the world, I think when that's removed, just the general premise of society will have an enormous change. Just having that kind of gravity removed from society is going to have a very positive impact. And I think that that's also part of the reality that we can't foresee real well, because we've never been outside of that world. I grew up in that world. My parents grew up in that world. Our parents, their parents, going all the way back, like I said in my God Eaters lecture, all the way back to time immortal, all the way back to the flood. And so, you know, we've been in this schism for a very long time. And so, yeah, we're going to get out of it. And especially when they remove that entity, that enterprise that has been working so hard to keep us the way that we are. And I think that that would be beautiful. And then one of the major ways I think that will happen is with the med beds and the bringing in of a higher technology, Tesla technology, and working with energy frequency and vibration for understanding and for medicine. I think that's going to have an enormous impact on society. And I even said, I'll stop here, but I even said the other day to someone, imagine how much society existentially will change when nobody gets sick anymore and people start living 1,000 years. Imagine how different society will be at that point. Imagine how wise people will be after living 200, 300, 400 years. I mean, that's an entirely different existence there. That's an interplanetary existence. I mean, we can't even fathom such a thing. And I think ultimately that's where we're going, because we're going to be so healthy. We're going to be so incredibly physically healthy and spiritually healthy. And I think that's coming.
Right. Well, I want to add, what is, whether it's dark or light, whatever one you want to talk about, what has been, now we can delve a little deeper. I mean, I think people can understand we're not having a surface conversation. What's been one or a couple of things that have blown your mind the most to learn in the last few years, whether it's the extent of the human trafficking, the underground tunnels, past lives, whatever you want to talk about?
The abduction of children and what they do to them. When I was doing research for my God Eaters video 1, that was when I really got into some dark places. I read a book called, oh man, I have it in the video. It's Blood. What is that video? I'm not going to take the time to find it, but it was this book that described the real method and processes that has been and was trained into families in how you go about hunting a family. Like, there is literally a method that has been developed in how you acquire a family and then take them in and then torture and use them to however which way you wish. That there was actually a methodology that was developed to carry this out, a methodology in how to take a child and prepare them to be harvested. There's actually books that describe how to do this. And when I was doing the research, it's one thing to observe that. It's another thing to learn that. It's another thing to actually do that. And then it's an even deeper level to teach people how to do that. The level of sheer, unadulterated, pure evil that it takes to carry that out and then to shape the society so that they will have babies for you to then go out and take and use, and develop governments that will intentionally develop for the purpose of taking over humanity and farming it. To me, when I found out that all of this was real, that it was all methods, plans, they had written down books, that trinkets and things that these predators would use to entice a child. If you look at that picture, it's that guy that's on CNN. He's really blonde and he has a really light complexion.
Cooper.
Who is it?
Anderson Cooper from the Vanderbilt family.
Him and his mother. His mother in that photo that was taken for Vanity magazine, and it's him and his brother before they killed his brother. And his mom is wearing a necklace, and this necklace had been passed down to her from pedophiles in the past that had used that necklace as a trinket that would entice a child because it had all this stuff on it. And what happens is when a predator walks into a room, they'll be wearing something that they know children will like, and it will engage them with the child. And so this was a necklace that had been used by generations of people before her to capture children and take them in and do horrible things to them. And she was wearing this with pride. She was wearing this as something that like you pass down to your children. This is how you will go about molesting children and capturing them and torturing them. You will use this piece. And she had it in this picture when she's with her children. And when I saw and learned of this kind of depravity, I realized that these people have completely given over their humanity. There's no human left there. There's no human inside that body. It doesn't exist anymore. There's no compassion there. There's nothing. That's why they have that cremation of care ceremony at the owl that they have in California. I can't remember, Bohemian Grove.
Right.
They go about rituals to destroy the compassion in people so that they will then carry these deeds out onto others because there's no compassion left. All the humanness has been removed systematically from this person. It was this kind of stuff, these kind of details, this kind of psychology that completely ruined me. That I was like, you know what? I don't care what it takes. I'm going to expose this. This is absolutely wrong on so many levels. I don't care what it takes. I'm going to get this out. And it really was the impetus behind the God Eaters video, behind starting my channel. I mean, the first video I ever released was Luciferians and Luciferian, I can't remember, but it was in December of 2019. And it was a study of Luciferianism. And the whole reason I did it was because I had just discovered all this stuff. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to stay quiet. I'm going to get this out. And so I put it out on my Facebook without, you know, I didn't even think anything of it. And I got like 10,000 views. And I kept getting letters from people similar to how my mom received letters. I kept getting letters from people saying, you got to start a YouTube channel. You have to get this information out. You're too small on Facebook. You have to get this stuff out. And so that's when I posted it to YouTube. And then a couple years later, I did the God Eaters video. And it's because when you find these things out and you find out children are being harmed like this, for me, I couldn't stay quiet. I couldn't allow this stuff to continue to go on and just say, well, they'll take care of it. Someone else will fix it. I had to do and say something. And so to answer your question, that's what shocked me the most. And then that's what caused me to go out on this entirely different bent in life, because at that point, it doesn't matter anymore. You're going to do anything to save the kids and help the kids. And so that for me was the big thing. That was the big turning point for me.
Well, that's why we do it, Chuck. And I didn't know you were going to say that, but as you spoke, I could feel all of that within myself and Scott and our viewers. And it still breaks my heart to hear it. But this is why we have to do this, because we can't have this happening to humanity and especially children anymore. This has to end.
Well, and it's not even veiled. You know, I mean, they love to rub it in our faces. Look at the red shoes. You know, I mean, after a ritual like the rituals they have, everyone's shoes are red with blood. But now, you know, when do you see the Pope not wearing red shoes? You know, when do you see all these, groups of powerful men together with their red shoes? And, you know,
the mockery.
Right.
The mockery that shows you where they're at, that it's not just a mentality, but it's actually a lifestyle. These people love to mock us. They love to mock the children. Like I said, there's no humanity. There's no saving grace in these people. You're not going to change these people. These people have totally sold themselves out to evil. They have no intention of ever going back or leaving. They're going to die this way. There's no way to bring someone like that back. They're totally gone. Their brain and humanness has been totally wiped out. It's like the hard drive of compassion has been totally erased. There's nothing left. And that's why eventually we'll see the gallows. That's why eventually the only option is to end these people, because you cannot recalibrate them. There's no saving them. They're not going to go to some counseling and get this out of their system. That's not going to happen. These people have totally sold themselves out. And that was another thing that helped me understand the situation, was that there's no saving these people. But the Great Awakening isn't these people having this amazing understanding and they suddenly come back. No, man. Though they have to be removed from the planet. And that's why it will be so different when we get over this next hump, is because those people will no longer be here. It's like having rotten apples in the bunch. You're not going to have good apples after a week, because that bad rotten apple is going to ruin all of them much faster than they would have just naturally. And you see, that's a good way to see and understand how evil has been potentiated on this planet. It's like you got one bad apple in the whole bunch. The bunch isn't bad. Humanity isn't bad as a whole. They're not. But they've been so brainwashed and indoctrinated and ruined by the rot that people think that all of humanity is bad. People think people are born sinners and evil because they have been taught to think that way about humanity. That has to change. The whole mentality of how people really are has to be taken out of this idea that man is inherently bad and changed into that man is inherently good, which is the Buddhist philosophy. And with that type of beginning, you then can build a reasonable philosophy. But if you're trying to build a philosophy with the idea that you are inherently bad, you're inherently prone to evil, that you inherently will destroy your life, well, at that point, you've already lost the battle. You have to walk into the test thinking, I'm going to pass this test. I'm going to remember the things that I've learned. I'm going to apply myself and do a good job. You have to go in with that positive mentality. So when you're starting people off with their identity and they understand themselves, first, I'm a sinner. That's the very first thing I am, is a sinner, and then I get saved. That's entirely the wrong philosophy. And the reason why you've been taught that philosophy is to victimize you. And a victim obeys. And the whole idea in religion is to get you to obey by victimizing you. And so people have to understand, as long as I'm thinking as a victim, as long as I'm thinking that I am a sinner, I am already lost. I'm already in the trap. There's no escaping that. You have to leave the idea that you start as a sinner. You must leave the idea that sin has to be abolished. You have to leave that idea, which goes back to the philosophy we were talking about earlier. You have to see things as contrastive, not as absolute. You have to see the impurities of life as what bring color to life. In the exact same philosophy I offered in my number 2 nature video, in that I showed that a rainbow comes from white light, but a rainbow is distorted white light, but that doesn't mean it's bad. It's just distorted, and it's beautiful within its distortion. Just like a sapphire, it's beautiful in the blue color that it carries, which is its impurities. And we are the same way with ourselves. Yes, we will make mistakes. Yes, we will do harmful things, but that's not because we're sinners. That's because we're in a dualistic reality. We're in a reality that is both positive and negative. And we must mature and learn to walk in harmony with both, not all one side or all the other, fighting one side and promoting the other. That's imbalance. That just creates anxiety and confusion, and you will remain an adolescent in your philosophy if you continue to try and understand the world that way. So you must exit these self-degrading, victimizing ideas about yourself if you're ever going to transition into the Great Awakening, because the people in the Great Awakening understand themselves as light, understand themselves as purity, understand themselves as simply an expression of God having an experience in a dualistic reality. And it's really that kind of thing. And you just simply float in that ocean. You learn to navigate that ocean, just like a sailor learns to navigate with a headwind. He accepts the fact that it's a headwind, and he simply tacks. And he still travels north with a wind that's head against him. He still is making progress and traveling forward, even though he's not going as fast as maybe he wished he would. That's just what life is offering him right now. And so we simply adjust to that. You know?
Right. Well, and I do. First of all, thank you for that. I want to let people know it's the first video on your channel 3 years ago. Lucifer and Luciferians, Masters of Deception.
That's it.
And that's the thing. I guess there's a contrast to this interview, because we started with, if someone's watching this and hasn't, isn't really aware of some of the evil, and now we're at this other end, which is what inspired yourself and Scott and I to do this. I can't be quiet when it comes to children, and neither can you gentlemen. So anything you want to expand on that?
Yeah, since you're so well versed with the Khazarian history, I know I get an awful lot of questions about that, and it would seem that a lot of this behavior, a lot of this structure, this, whether it's institutionalized or otherwise, it all seems to stem from that area, that history, and it's very much alive today. It seems like if we look at the geopolitical situation right now with Ukraine and Russia and Turkey and what's going on, I mean, it really has its roots in that history that is so hidden that very few people even know about it. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's really the history of how our society became the way that it is. I mean, if you wonder why is the world so nutty, why have they been doing what they've been doing? Well, it's because we have been infiltrated as long as history has been written by a real intentional group that has every intention of taking over the world. And this started way back when there was a massive cataclysm that happened called the Younger Dryas. And this happened tens of thousands, about 11, 12,000 years ago. A meteor hit this planet. And there's a massive crater in Greenland where it hit. And when this meteor came in to the atmosphere and hit the planet, it passed through 7 miles of solid ice that instantaneously melted. And so you had this enormous flood of fresh water that came out of the polar regions that flooded the world. And this was catastrophic to the development of society, to the tribes that were, I mean, to the way, whatever human beings looked like then, whatever was happening in the world at that time, whatever we looked like, all that kind of thing, was all reset at that moment. And it was within that moment, as societies began to develop way back in the tribal age, when the tribes and the little groups of people begin to reform. And obviously, when you're within a tribe, you're much more protected than when you're just by yourself in the wilderness. And so as these tribes developed and grew, you also then begin to develop societies. And these societies come out of tribal systems. And so the initial societies that were developed in Babylonia and Ur and Uruk and Sumer and these ancient societies, what began to happen is they grow. And because a group, a tribe, as it gets more and more members, it gets more and more powerful. That's just the way that it works. And it's like ants. If you've got a whole, I mean, there's strength in numbers. That's a Sun Tzu idea, ancient art of war. And so, yeah, if you have a whole millions and millions of ants, well, you can kill a person with enough ants. But if you got just 1 or 2 of them, they're not going to do anything. Okay, well, this group figured out ways, and it's in my estimation, they were taught this by the societies that were before the Younger Dryas. And it's a technology that it can be used to control and usurp a growing group of people. And you do it through fear. And so this is why Babylonia, this is why all those ancient cultures were centered in fear, were centered in power, were centered in war, were centered in usurpation. I mean, even in the Old Testament, you can read how it was just warring, fighting tribes. I mean, these people are all battling it out. You know, we're right, no, we're right. And basically the only people that are passing on history are the winners. That's all that's happening. And so all the way back to the tribal age, all the way to now, everything you know has been told to you, has been passed down by the people who were winning all these wars, who were taking over the culture. This is why when Rome fell, all of the religions and the belief systems that were all a part of Rome became what the Catholic Church used to control the society. And so you basically have the fall of Rome happening because of this usurpative group, and then they just have regime change. And they form themselves into the Catholic Church. Well, we all know that the Catholic Church was both government and religious ruler for 1,500 years until the Reformation. And so it's the same group that formed Rome, that came out of Babylonia, that formed the Catholic Church. This is the vein that's following here. And so this same small group that took over these little tribes and this power and corruption and so forth that's happening, they formed Babylon, which then eventually became Rome, which then eventually became the Catholic Church. And you always have, this is the key vein for people to understand, is you always have the same vein of authority that is ruling these institutions. So even though Rome, as its costume, was ruling as an emperor, the emperor simply changed costumes and became the Pope. And then the council that surrounded the emperor simply became the bishops that surrounded the Pope. And they simply took their regime that was underneath the idea of war and fighting and so forth, and they just translated that into psychological war. And they went from ruling people with the fist and the sword to ruling people with the mind. And that was the beginning of the Dark Ages. That's why there was no information. And the only information people got was what was handed down by the winners, the Catholic Church. Okay, well then that eventually formed into the smaller ruling governorships that were all that pebbled all of Europe. And so you have this religious institution that comes in, and you then begin to take over all the small tribal areas or groups that ruled all of Europe and this growing conglomerate of people, and it's infiltrated by the church. And the church comes in, and after about 375 AD, it's basically illegal to worship any other god but that which the one that they ordain, and they themselves make the Pope God incarnate on this planet. And so what you begin to need to understand here is that it's the same folks that are ruling the society, and then out from the Roman Catholic Church, they begin to rule. They infiltrate into the ruling aristocracies that are ruling over Europe, and they, as I explained in my God Eaters 2 video, I believe, they then begin to breed with the aristocracy to destroy the purity of the bloodlines and make all the bloodlines their own by basically taking those that are in their group and breeding with the king or breeding with the queen, so that the offspring that is that comes out of these ruling agencies is their own. And so the king, as you know, like king, the king of England now and his offspring, none of them are royal. They all come out of this Khazarian group that has infiltrated the ruling powers that have controlled the world. And this systematically goes all the way back to the tribal systems that occurred after this enormous cataclysm. And simply all that's happened is they have controlled the societies. That's why every war since Napoleon has been the same side fighting. It's not two opposing sides that are warring over who's going to control. It's the same society that is using war to control the society, to determine where and what direction the society goes in. And this is why after the end of World War II, all of the Nazi leadership was hired by the United States under the paperclip thing to bring in people into NASA and into the institutions that are going to direct and determine the future of America. And so the future of America now is being determined by Nazis who have infiltrated in under the guise that they lost the war. And so you have an entire society of people who think the Nazis lost, who think that Hitler died. They're under this entirely different reality, and they don't realize, no, actually, all of that leadership became the leadership of the United States. And you tell someone right now that who doesn't know that, they'll say to you, that's insane. There's no way that could happen. But if you watch my God Eaters video, you'll see the timeline. You'll see exactly how. Yes, indeed. Absolutely. The Nazis have been running this country ever since World War II.
Yeah,
and that's the reality.
Yeah. And it's why we've thrown so much senseless money at Ukraine. I mean, aside from the value of money laundering and whatnot that's actually been going on. But, you know, I mean, we saw the emblem of the Black Sun, the Order of the Black Sun on all the plate carriers of the soldiers. Exactly. A lot of people don't know what that symbol means. That's, you know, but, you know, when Putin said, I want to denazify Ukraine, people acted like he, you know, was speaking in tongues or something. They didn't understand.
It's the same thing that happens when you approach people with a different kind of religion. It's the same kind of disassociation. And so when you say that there's Nazis running America, it's the same kind of eyes at the bus stop. You know, you just kind of, what? Like, what? I don't understand. What? And people, they have to, like I said, like we talked about earlier, you have to lead them through a reasonable train of thought. You can't just dump on them. Yeah, that there are bases that are 7 miles underground, and the military has been running these things for over 50 years. You can't just come out and say that. You have to bring them into that space gently, or they just completely reject it on the face of it. They just completely reject it. And so the idea that this is the reason why NASA faked the moon landings. It's because it's a propaganda organization. Not everything that NASA releases is false. Some of the stuff they release is true, but not all of it. You have to use your discernment to understand. And when you see the videos that they released for the moon landings, it becomes very obvious that they're fake. It becomes very obvious that there are very practical reasons why there's absolutely no way they got through the Van Allen belt with a 1/4 inch of aluminum. Science, you cannot do that. It's scientifically impossible. So you begin to understand, okay, why would they want to lie about a moon landing? And the reason why they want to lie about a moon landing is control, to make it look like the United States is at the pinnacle. We are at the top. We are a ruling agency. We're at the top. We're at top of technology. Everyone should listen to us because we know what the F we're doing, because we just put a man on the moon. And it's all a guise to make you think that there's something that they're not, to make them think they're more powerful than they are. They're not. It's all an illusion. And as long as people live in fear, as long as people think that they're less than, they won't ever approach something that gives off that kind of lie, because they're so caught up in what? I can't believe that that's actually true. And that's one of the reasons why the Khazarians have been able to go as far as they have, because when you find out what actually is really going on, it's not believable. It's so far out there. Like when you guys asked me, what was it that put me over the edge? The stuff that I said is so far out there to the everyday average person hearing that 8 million children are consumed a year. It's so far outside the norm that it's rejected on the front end. Like there's no way. And that's how they hide, by being so incredibly outlandish that you'll never believe it when you're actually told the story. You'll just say, no way, there's no way that's true. There's no way they cut the faces off of people and put them on their face and drink their blood. There's no way they do that. That is absolutely not true. And the reason the person doesn't hear it is because it's so crazy. And that's a great way to hide. You hide right in someone's backyard. They would have no idea what you're doing because you're so close to them. It's so crazy that they would never believe that it's true. And that's how.
Entirely true.
Yeah.
You know, the deception is just so layered as well. That's what's always astounded me with all these years of research is, you know, just when you think you've got a reasonable grasp of the information and so on, then you realize, oh wait, there's a whole other layer here, and you delve into that one, and there's another layer and another layer. But it does really all go back to at least on the geopolitical front, it really goes back to this Khazarian leadership. And, you know, the Club of Rome, you know, that's an homage to Rome. That's name a president that wasn't a member of, you know, the Club of Rome. My answer would be probably Trump.
Yeah, let me give you a real good example here. A great way to understand it is if you say, or here's a good one. If you are carrying around a tumor and you don't know it, think of the tumor as the Khazarians. Okay. So here you are, you're eating really healthy foods, you know, you're exercising, you're doing all this stuff, but yet you keep feeling sick. You keep feeling like, why do I continue to have this pain in my gut? I don't understand. Like I'm eating good foods. I'm educating myself on how to stay healthy. I'm detoxing. I'm doing a lot of stuff, but yet you can't figure out what it is that keeps pulling you down, keeps making you sick, keeps doing this stuff to you. And until you find out that you have cancer, that you have a tumor growing inside of you that is eating your body, and until you rid of that tumor or stop feeding it, it will continue to eat you. It's the same exact thing with these Khazarians. They are a tumor on this planet, and they will continue to eat us until we learn, oh, that's why they're leaving the border open. Oh, that's why the Red Cross is corrupt. Oh, that's why they keep telling me to get chemotherapy, because it's not about my betterment. And it never was about my betterment. And there's a cancer in this society. There's a cancer in this government. And until people find out that there's a tumor in there, they're not going to get healthy. And until you find out they're kidnapping our kids, until you find out what they're actually doing, we will continue to be sick as a society, regardless of how much detoxing is going on, regardless of how much gore you find out. You have to realize the reality that you're in is not the reality that you think it is. And until you see that, you will continue to be part of the problem. In order to be part of the solution, you must learn that we have cancer. This society is cancerous. It has cancerous people within it. And that has to be known in order for the people who are healthy and are not cancerous to build their immune system, to build their mind so that they resist the disease, the menticide that this cancer is attempting to put into the society. And that takes time, effort, risk, pain, all of those things, because it's really hard to get rid of cancer. It's really hard to beat a tumor. It takes everything you got. And it's the same exact thing with this society and this culture. It's going to take everything that each one of us has got in order to break down and remove this tumor called the Khazarians that is poisoning this society. And they're going to continue, just like the tumor will keep eating you until you kill it or remove the food. It's not going to stop. It doesn't matter how much reasoning, how much you pray, how much the stuff that you do to try and beat it, until you actually stop it eating and actually get it out of your body, it will continue to feed on you. And the Khazarians are the same way. You can pray all you want for them to go away. That is not going to make them go away. You must awaken yourself. You must be a light to others. You must be proactive. It is not a passive thing. You must be an active participant in humanity in order for humanity to heal from this cancer. So I implore everybody, watch my videos, watch y'all's videos, watch videos of people who see a deeper perspective in society, even if you don't agree with them fully, because you need these perspectives in your mind in order to decipher for yourself what is truth and how we are sick as a society.
You know, I'm going to take it a step further with the Khazarians, and we can include the Fourth Reich in this as well, because there's a lot of correlation. But you know, and I haven't found anything all that definitive, but there's a lot of speculation about an other than human component with both groups. One, under Hitler's leadership and so on, they were very much interested in ancient technologies, advanced technologies, non-human technologies, and they we've heard about the Nazi bell, and you've heard about the crafts in Antarctica, but then we also have the Anunnaki.
Yes.
Yeah, the Anunnaki origin story, which is kind of, I mean, that's a big one, and that somehow the Khazarians are a race of people that were genetically very different from the rest of us. Now, what do you think? Big topic.
Yeah, I mean, that's all part, that goes back. I mean, I didn't cover the alien component when I was talking about these things.
Right.
When people ask, what's this technology talk about? What's this that the Nazis were doing? What's this technology about healing people? What was going on is I think that there was an alien influence that was starting to educate in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. In other words, you can make a ship float if you just simply understand electromagnetics at the quantum scale, and you won't need any thrusters. You won't need any gas. You can just do it. You can just do it with the natural proportions that are available in nature. And so this is a technology that is foreign to us because we've been raised in a different type of physics, a different type of technology than what is actually available. So when you hear about things like med beds, when you hear about things like UFOs and floating ships and no need for thrusters and everything, it's beyond your comprehension because you've been dumbed down with bad physics and bad science that's been intentionally used to keep you pigeonholed. And so there is a very large component to this Khazarian effort that is off planet, otherworldly, like it's beyond us as human beings. This is part of the great awakening that none of us can picture, that's beyond imagination. And so the Khazarians are a group of people that have been highly influenced by this outside humanity alien force. Some people think that it is exclusively mind. Some people think that it's actual physical alien beings that are actually talking and interacting with them. Other people are like, no, it's just all mind. And they're interacting and accessing these other parts of mind in order to get it. Whatever you subscribe to, the bottom line is there is technology at work that the normal people like you and me in society are not aware of. And the Khazarians have used this kind of technology in order to stay in power. That's this black ops you hear about. The entire drug trade and all that was developed in the United States for drugs and heroin and selling all that was all done to generate black money that can't be accounted for, that never enters government. And by having a drug society and a world that's run with drugs, you can develop all of these means and ways of making all kinds of money that is never accounted for. And then that money can then be used to fund black ops and military that none of the public is aware of, that the government never talks about. And you have all the funding you need. The Khazarians are in on that. Human beings are valuable. Human beings, when they're used as a commodity, are extremely valuable. And when you have a society of people that is non-human, they don't care about morals. They don't care about what this is doing to humanity. All they see us as is meat. We are meat to exploit. And so the Khazarians have been infiltrated by these types of philosophies, these types of technologies that has altered their mind, that has altered their DNA. Your DNA adjusts as you go through life. The DNA, this is one of the things I learned from my enzymologist when I had cancer. When you copulate with your spouse or your partner, whatever is contained in your DNA and your spouse's DNA, it is as you were at that moment. And all the components that will build that little baby in mama's tummy are based on the DNA of the dad and the DNA of the mom. And that adjusts so that as you go through life and the life lessons you learn, the wisdom that you develop, and all of these kind of understandings that you have, this is programmed into your DNA and it will affect your offspring. And so when you have a society of people that's saturated in demonism, that's saturated in blood sacrifice, that's sacrifice and that's saturated in mind games, all this kind of stuff, their DNA has altered over time. It has degraded into this evil-oriented type of psychopathy. And so when these people breed, they're putting that evil into this group of people. And so when you start doing that, like they were way back thousands of years ago, what you begin to have on the other end of that are these people that have a very low self-awareness and consciousness, very low human characteristics. Your humanity is also in your DNA, and you will have tendencies in the same way. If you have alcoholic parents, you will have a tendency to become an alcoholic yourself because you are carrying their DNA and you are around them your whole life, and they are putting into you the diseases that brought them into the space of alcoholism. And it's the exact same thing that happens in these Khazarian bloodlines. They are raising these people, these children, to understand the world through this very evil perspective. And so you change the potential of that person by putting DNA into them that is infiltrated with this evil. And they will have a tendency, an aptitude that drives them more towards that type of behavior in the exact same way as an alcoholic, in the exact same way as a drug addict, if you are unfortunate to have that for your parents. And you will have to do a tremendous amount of personal work over the course of your entire life to free yourself from the menticide that enters you from your alcoholic parents. And it's the same thing with these folks, but the problem is these people, when their children are infants, they're not even one. They're turning them over for rape. They're turning them over for torture to totally destroy the humanness in that child, so that as that child grows, it grows in the state of rape. It grows in the state of harm and torture. That's the only world they know. And eventually you have generations of people that have grown up in such an environment. And think of the mindset of such a person. Think of the DNA that has been infiltrated by this. I mean, you are dealing with literally someone that has DNA from thousands of years ago that has been nothing but torturing and harming humanity. That person is compromised. That's not the same humanness that you were born with and I was born with. They're not born with the same level of compassion as you and I are, because that DNA aspect has been systematically lowered and lowered. It's called neoteny in the animal world. If you have say like you get a male and female fox and you begin to raise them at your house and you feed them and you try and calm them down. And so they're pups that they have when they breed. The pups, you're with the pups and you're nice to them and all this kind of stuff. What begins to happen is generation after generation of those foxes, they will eventually become domesticated dogs, because you are breeding out of their DNA the fighting instinct, the predator instinct, the drive to kill and to continue themselves because you're providing them food. They have no reason to develop their hunting skills because every day you're giving them food. And so this DNA propensity that was in them from long ago is lost over time through the process of neoteny. And eventually you have this passive fox that acts like a dog that could never survive in raw nature. They'd die instantly. And that's the exact same thing that's happened to our society is the case of neoteny. And you have a society that has been infantilized. They have been turned into adolescents over years and years and years. And in the same way that the Khazarians have become more and more predator-oriented, hate-oriented, hunting-oriented, usurpation-oriented, greed-oriented. It's in their blood to be like this. And so since they're raised like that, they're basically non-human. And that is who has been running this country. The leaders you see on the front, on TV and stuff, they have gone through the torture ceremonies. These people have been totally destroyed in their brain. And so there's not a human back behind those eyes. There's no compassion there. Everything they're saying is to lie to you and to use you because all the compassion has been destroyed in them through this DNA usurpation that happens over thousands of years. So that's what is in them, in my opinion. That's the DNA that they have, and it's horrendous.
Yeah, and I don't think it's limited to this country at all. I think it's pretty much worldwide.
Worldwide.
And, you know, much like your Anderson Cooper Vanderbilt example, you know, I think in many cases they believe they're doing a service to their, because you know, they're giving them a legacy of all of this power, but they're ruining their lives to do it. They don't see it that way.
The power is what they want. It's not about
right.
The betterment of themselves as a legacy. It's a legacy of the group. They're working for the group. In much the same way a person is in a rank in the military, they're not thinking for themselves, they're thinking for the military. It's the same mentality with these people, but it's as far as humanness is concerned. They're in a military that is anti-human, anti-humanity. And so they're in a type of mindset and situation that is totally foreign and totally different than what you and I, compassion-centered people, are oriented to. And so it's a totally different mindset here. You have to go about the way of taking back ownership of everything in such a way that's different than normal. And you mentioned the America thing. America was to be the military arm, and then London was to be the financial arm, and then Rome was to be the religious arm. And these are the three power centers that the Khazarians used to take over the world. So that's why the U.S. has been such a militant group, has been such a warmongering group. It's because we were to be the military center to fight and destroy the rest of the world through the leadership that they put into place. That's why I kept mentioning the Nazis and being put into NASA and this kind of thing. It's because the intention was to make the United States the military arm. That's why Rome has remained the religious arm, and the Vatican and all that has remained there. They were supposed to be the religious arm, and that's why the money systems still are in London, and they remain in Europe like that. It's because these power groups that were running the planet wanted them in these locations strategically so that they continue their rulership over the planet.
Well, and it's that all three examples have, you know, you've got DC, the city of London, and the Vatican, and they all have their own statehood, their own laws, they're quite separate from the countries that host them. Kind of like parasites in a human body.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
I just wanted to interject. You know, a lot of shows have commercials. We don't really do that here at this point. So we are, you know, Scott and I have been bartenders for many years. We haven't done that in a while. So people have asked, how do they support the show? I put the links in our Rumble. We'll have our link tree below, whether people see this now or later. We have a PayPal. We have a Stripe. We are subsidized by our viewers, and that's either, you know, tipping the show or going to our store. Like I said, that's on Linktree, and there's products that we're part of and that we take ourselves, etc. And so I just want to say thank you for the people that kept us going, because we didn't realize this was going to turn into quite what it has. But in order to get guests like you on our show, we have to do research. We got to listen. We need to learn, this material, or take some of the things that Scott has learned over his many years to ask these questions like this. So I just wanted to say that to the viewers. So thank you guys for asking for the support. But Chuck, is there, and hey, we're not looking to stop right now because it is Friday and sometimes we go a couple hours. Is there anything that you want to talk about that you haven't been able to yet? And I know this is a Q&A, but is there anything that you want to bring up that maybe you haven't got a chance to talk about yet, or that you feel compelled to talk about? Because we're covering a lot of ground here.
Or maybe the audience will have some questions they can include in the chat.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'd like to remind you also, if there's any comments you have that you'd like to live on with the show,
right?
Put them in the comment section, and they will, because the chat goes away. But if you have any questions, put them in the chat if you have any questions for Chuck.
Yeah.
So with
I would say, what I'm doing, I didn't come into this with anything in particular to say, but when you ask me what I would want to say if asked that question, the first thing that comes to mind is just what my current series is. I'm doing a series right now that deals with identifying through nature. I'm in 2 videos in, and I'm real excited about the series because I'm doing the 3rd video right now. I'm doing all the research. I've been researching for quite a while in this 3rd series, and I'm going to be entering into the whole history of Hermeticism, Gnosticism, and Neoplatonism. And I'm going to be using those to compare and contrast the beginnings of Christianity to then begin to understand why Hermeticism was ostracized, why the church worked so hard to shut it down, why so much effort has been placed into keeping people from identifying through nature. And so my series I'm real excited about and would love for people to see is simply dealing with this major issue we have right now, which is identity. Who are you? Which is the question that Alan Watts asked his entire career. And that's the same question I'm posing because it's such a good one. And that's not a question I'm trying to answer. I'm trying to ask that question so you yourself answer it for yourself, because I can't tell you who you are any more than I can tell you who God is, or I can tell you anything. You have to discover these things on your own. And really, the series is awesome because it's providing data, information, perspectives for people to truly find their identity outside of any religion. And that's really what I'm wanting to do. I'm encouraging people to do, is to no longer see yourself identified through how you've been told how to identify with your religion, rather deciding for yourself, becoming a little disobedient there, and no longer listening to what your religion tells you to do, and deciding for yourself what you resonate with, where you find understanding and identity right here in the landscape that surrounds you. And to me, I'm real excited about that because it's so applicable to both this side of the Great Awakening and the other side of the Great Awakening. It's not one side or the other, and it's not super gory. That's another thing that I'm happy about, is I'm not having to do another series where I'm talking about just such horrendous stuff. This stuff is much more uplifting, encouraging, and people will feel better overall after just hearing some of this information, because it's not degrading to people. It's not telling you all kinds of stuff that's gory and nasty. It's really just helping folks notice the beauty that's around them, the sacred geometry that's around them, and seeing themselves in that same beautiful space, because I really want to be a word of encouragement to people, because right now people's worlds are falling apart and they're really disillusioned. And I really want to be a light, a shining light that really shows, hey, it's okay. I know the world is totally falling apart. Your religion's falling apart, but it's okay. Here's some basic principles that you can see and that you can observe and love in nature, that you yourself will find within yourself, to maybe bring some appreciation for yourself and appreciation for your environment, which generates love, which generates respect, which generates appropriate behavior. And that's really what my emphasis is. And if anybody is wondering what I'm about, that's what I'm about. And this series is dead center where I want to be. So my part 3 will be out probably in a number of weeks to a month or so. But my part 1 and 2 are already posted, and they're really helpful in just expanding perspective and helping others see the world a little bit larger and a little bit more beautiful. So that's what I would want to say if asked.
God, and your timing is impeccable, because that's really what the world needs right now. I mean, I think whether you're aware of it or not, there's a real intuitive part of what you're doing. You know, I mean, you've got some great insight, you've got some great internal guidance, and it's what people need to hear.
Well, and we love your passion, and I think that you know, the people that you study and the amount of time that you put into your videos, can you maybe walk the folks a little bit what goes into your videos? I mean, some of them are almost take you a couple 100 hours, right? I mean, this is some real work that goes into this.
That's a really great question. I am so glad you asked that. I would have never thought to ask that question. Okay. So my brain works, needless to say, my brain works a little bit different than the average. Okay.
You don't say.
When I approach a subject, I just begin to write and I just begin to explore. I just begin to put my fingers out and begin to just feel what's out there. Let's just get an idea. And so I try not to center on any one person, any one thing, but just try and just walk into it and let's just kind of gather information. And so there's good and bad sides to that. The bad side is that when you don't really isolate on a person and you really find out everything about them, you may miss some stuff about them that would have normally been off-putting, but they're so valuable in some of the other areas that they claim that their presence is really worth it. And so one of the things that I do in my videos, and when I start them in, I never know how they're going to start or stop. I always deal with the content. So the first thing that I do is just what is going to be in this thing. And then once I get an idea of what's going to be in it, like namely this last one that I've been working on, has been a real in-depth study of Hermetic history. And so I've been really saturating myself in lectures because I do better with lectures than books. I've been saturating myself in lectures that deal with Hermeticism, Hermeticism's history, what it's about, its principles, how it was dissolved and removed from society, all this kind of stuff. And I begin to just gather, and I begin to make slides as to what I'm finding out. And then once I make the slides, as I'm continuing to do my research, I will come across people that talk about the stuff that's in my slides just naturally, because that's what I have gravitated towards. And so there will be a few voices that I begin to hear, and I'll hear a few things from people and I'll think, okay, that sounds really good. Like the two gals that are in God Eater Part 1, there are two gals that I came across by chance as I was doing my studies. I didn't know who they were. I didn't know all their ministry and what they did. They just had a few minutes where they said some stuff that was right in line with what I needed for my video. And I thought, you know, that's a great thing to do, is to bring in other people into my video, because nobody wants to see me the whole time. They would like to see other folks and other slides and things besides me. And so I always like to include a few cameos of other people in my videos. And so when I did my God Eaters 1 video, I included these two gals that were in it. And unfortunately, I didn't know their names. And I didn't even think at the time to find out their names, do research. Again, this is what I was saying, when you don't pigeonhole and get into the details of every single person. I didn't take the time to write all that stuff out. And so I just included them. And so sometimes I'll include people that people like, and sometimes I'll include people that don't like. And it's because others have done more research and have figured out more about other folks than I have, and they very well may say some things that I don't agree with. But I'm the type of person, and this is how I'm weird again, I'm the type of person that doesn't dismiss someone simply because they say one or two things that I don't like. Because I feel like if I continue to do that, it doesn't matter who I find, I will eventually find something that they say that I don't like. And if I eliminate every single person that says one or two things I don't like, there's nobody left. And now I'm in an echo chamber. Now I'm in a glass house or an echo chamber and only hearing what I want to hear. And so I think when it comes to my videos, it's a good idea to use a number of different folks. And so unfortunately, fortunately, sometimes I'll include people that have said some things that people that watch my video absolutely hate. And all of a sudden, with folks that don't have enough discernment, they will dismiss me, dismiss my videos, dismiss everything that I've said, simply because there's a few things communicated that they have no time for. And this is what's really important right now in the Great Awakening, is that there are going to be many personalities that we all come across as we go out and discover for ourselves the information that resonates with us. And there's a whole diversity of personalities. Some personalities are really abrupt and mean. Some are very gentle and kind. Some are kind of middle. And everybody has a different resonation point that they go with each of these people. And some people like a little softer message. And then some people like Mark Passio, who comes out, and I mean, it's the hardest, one of the toughest messages I could ever listen to, because that guy is so hardcore. Okay, well, some people like that. Some people don't. Does that make Mark Passio a bad or good guy simply because he's really passionate? No, it just means that he has a way, a style that doesn't work for a lot of people, but it works great for others. And this is what we all are going to have to come accustomed to as we find out information on our own, because we don't have a single source we're going to. And we're going to have to learn that some of the things that we say, like Cliff High says some things that I totally disagree with, like I couldn't disagree with more, but Cliff High also says some stuff that's like, wow, I have learned so much about the Khazarian mafia from Cliff High. It's unbelievable. But at the same time, Cliff has made some claims that I'm like, you know what? I don't see that at all. But you see, if I had to completely dismiss Cliff High, I would have never had the concepts that I made in part 1 of God Eaters that so many people resonated with. And it was because I kept Cliff High and used Cliff High that I was able to reach so many more people. But if I just simply base it as like, well, Cliff said that stuff I don't like, so I'm not going to use him in my video. My God Eaters 1 video wouldn't have done as well as it had, because I wouldn't have had that connection that Cliff High made. And so this is very, very, very important for people. I am going to say things you don't like, especially for Christians. I'm going to say things that will make you angry, that will make you shut the video off. But please, over time, learn to hear these kinds of things so that you can broaden your perspective and not have a perspective of a child, but have the perspective of an adult. And an adult has a perspective that is broad and far-ranging, because they understand the world is not as small as that of a child. And they understand that everyone is going to have a different philosophy and a different perspective. And you're going to have to ride that wave, brother. You're going to have to ride waves you don't like and waves that you do like in order to become a good surfer. And that's just life. That's just the way it is. And you're going to make mistakes. You're going to listen to some people and maybe you shouldn't have. And you're going to reject people, some that you maybe should have listened to. That's life. That is life. It's okay. It's no problem. We all have a learning curve, and we're all going through that. We need to have patience with everyone and work with everyone over time for the betterment of us all. And so that's kind of what I want to leave you guys with today, is just let's have a very broad perspective, and let's all learn to integrate stuff that resonates, and then just simply leave stuff that doesn't. And the folks that annoy you, the folks that you don't like, that get on your nerves, don't listen to them. Move to someone that more often says stuff that you like, that maybe every once in a while says stuff you don't, but overall they're giving you a good perspective. Man, integrate those people. You'll broaden your life, you'll broaden your world, and you'll be much easier to get along with, because you won't be so absolute and pigeonholed in your opinions.
Right. Well, and I just want to say, I mean, think for the audience, you know, here's Chuck. Look at his background. I mean, he's the son of a preacher man. He's been through cancer. He only has the best interest of humanity in mind. He's putting himself all out there. He does all this research. I mean, he's the type of guy that I want to listen to. He's the type of guy that many of us want to listen to. And yeah, it may not be perfect, but man, who you are and who your intentions and why you're doing this, like, you have all of the most beautiful pieces to be out here on the front lines. And we so appreciate what you're doing and your mind and the way that you get information out to people in your videos. It's just, you're a beautiful soul, man. I really appreciate you.
Agreed. And I want to say, I mean, being someone that studied this material quite a bit, Chuck's work is dead on in so many places. It's one of the better resources. If you don't want to have to hunt and pick, and spend hours and hours and hours of weeding through things, and you just really want to get familiar with the topic, Chuck does a beautiful job of laying it out, and that's rare. I have not yet found it quite like that.
Thank you. And please understand, I would never assume that I'm always right. I would never assume that my opinions are final. I would never assume the stuff that I say in my video I'll ever change my mind about. I will change my mind about. You can, I am not, and I don't think it's a good idea to be absolute in much of anything, because the world is ephemeral. It is constantly
Yes.
changing and reshaping itself. And the more absolute you become, the more in conflict you become with a nature reality that is morphing and changing constantly. Nature is saying to you, we are in a changing space. It develops. And one of the ways you develop wisdom, one of the ways you grow as an individual is you adjust your opinions over time and you grow and you realize, man, what I thought when I was 16, I was totally crazy. I don't think that way at all. We all are like that all the way until we die. Things that I say right now, I'll disagree with when I'm in my 80s. That's all part of growth and developing. And that's what's beautiful in this society, is that we all are growing and we're all individual works of art. And we're going to find pieces of art that we love, and we're going to find pieces of art that's just like, that's disgusting. And so that's just the beauty of life. And so find the ones that you resonate with, and the ones that you don't, it's okay. I'm going to say stuff you like. I'm going to say stuff that even I don't like at times. My dad used to say, even I don't agree with everything that I write. So it's one of those things where it just happens, and you just have to just go with it and develop with life. And then obviously you want to definitely veer towards the ones that are right more often than they're wrong, obviously. But nobody's going to get it right 100% of the time. And I certainly don't. I certainly know that I don't get it right 100% of the time. Absolutely. Absolutely.
But you're contributing to a greater understanding. Think about when this conversation really grows, when more and more people are having this conversation, talking about these things, becoming familiar with them, understanding the world around them, is some of the hidden things that you're certainly not going to get from the curated version. Think of the power in that, and then you can have amazing conversations like this one all the time, or maybe not all the time. It's a little exhausting, but
more often.
Yeah, but I mean, you know what I'm saying? There's a lot of power in this. It really is that great awakening. It really is.
Yes.
And it's a shared experience.
Yes. And that's beautiful. And that's why I love it, that it's not just about one religion. It's not just about one group of people. It's not just about one society. This is all of humanity. This is a beautiful process of development. And we are going to be an amazing, amazing culture on the other side of this. We just got to do some growing up. We just got some pain to go through right now, but we are going to be incredibly better for it on the other side, just like everyone is in their own life. And the worst moments in your life, the most trying times in your life, that's when you grow. That's when you become the incredible person that you are. And it is through that pain and suffering that you develop and become the incredible gem that you are. And so yeah, absolutely. It's all of us together. It's a societal experience, and we all need to work together in unity in that aspect, in that our diversity is our unity. And so, yeah, it's really beautiful like that. And I just really appreciate you guys having me on today. And thank you so much for your time. I love these kind of interviews. It's a lot of fun. Absolutely.
I'm glad, because we're gonna want to get you back soon.
Thanks, man. Yeah, after I get part 3 done, watch it and let me know, dude. Part 3 is gonna be jacked. I'm so excited. I'm real excited about it. Yeah.
Well, the audience is getting a lot out of it. I know I am. I know Joe is. So why not? We'll do a third interview once you've rolled out the next series.
Yeah, maybe midsummer. Be nice. Midsummer would be nice. Yeah.
Sounds good to me. I think a lot of things are changing pretty quickly. Who knows what midsummer is going to look like this year?
Yeah. Ain't that the truth? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I just want to thank Kevin, our producer. He's in the background. He brought up your YouTube page.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, so real quick, and Kevin, you can bring that up again, and we're going to invite Kevin in a moment for any final thoughts. But this is Chuck's YouTube page. I just want to say also that Scott and I, once a month, we do Patreon chats. If people want to join that, you can talk to us. We don't record anything, but we're doing that tomorrow. It's a
fun conversation.
Just great conversation. Yeah. So sometimes we'll invite
great people.
And you'll invite some of our guests that we've had on the show. You never know who's going to show up. But anyway, back to in this what you're seeing right now, all these videos that look very similar. Chuck, can you just let people know? I mean, that's your book and you narrate that. So can you just give the viewers some of that information, please?
Yeah, heck yeah. That's my audio book. That's each one of the chapters. And I read the whole thing. That's my audiobook. And that book is basically discusses the psychology of Christianity, how it works, the way that it works, why it acts in the way that it acts, what are the effects of Christianity on the individual long term, how does it affect one's relationships, their family. And so I take a critical look at this in the book. And so it's not a book that is read lightly. It's a heavy book. It has heavy concepts in it. It has deep psychology in it. And it's for the person that wants to learn more about why they think, how they think, especially if they're Christian or especially if they're religious. This book will talk about the psychology, the Stockholm Syndrome, trauma bond, and so forth, the victimizing. That is all a part of the psychology of Western religion. And so that's why you're seeing on the screen just the same picture over and over again. That's actually a picture from the lake that's just in my back of my house. I took that from a houseboat. My wife and I eat on that lake every summer, and that was an actual sunset. That is an unedited picture. That's an actual picture I took right about the time that was in 2015. So that was about 5 years before I wrote my book. But that's an unaltered, completely original picture I took with my iPhone from a boat. And so that's why that's on there. And yeah, it really
beautiful.
is awesome. I love it. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Awesome.
Well, Kevin, before we let Chuck go, do you have any questions you'd like to ask or any comments?
Please, Kevin.
Pop in.
Well, there is a few things I would like to ask you, Chuck.
I thought there might be.
Good. Good.
One of the biggest ones is in Christianity, it's all about going out and being like a missionary. You have to go out, you have to spread the religion. And I find that contradictory for myself personally, because I'm more about, I would rather do and demonstrate through actually doing something. Like if I'm going to be a kind person, I'm going to be a kind person. I'm not going to go tell someone to be kind. Is that a correct interpretation of that? Not through force, but through action?
Yeah, it's you don't develop a person to behave appropriately through fear and force. You realize these things through their understanding. So it is something that's one of the biggest concerns in religion, is that it's very much forced. Like you said, you're going door to door and you're putting this stuff right in front of people. And in the same way, you're told to pray without ceasing, and you're told these tasks, and it's very put upon the individual. Whereas if I want my child to be obedient, the way to, like you said, to get them to be obedient is through developing of their appreciation. And so you do that by you yourself as a parent showing them the appropriate way to behave. And they learn to appreciate that by watching the responses of people as they see how they respond to you as a parent. And so it's through this example that the child, then they themselves can begin to see the appropriate action. And so it's a much clearer perspective when you're not caught up in fear to see that action than it is otherwise. And so that's some of the stuff that the book gets into, and that fear is a demoralizing aspect, and yet you're told fear is the beginning of wisdom. And so there are these really antithetical concepts that are in there, but they're hidden under this idea of grace. They're hidden under this idea of absolute love. And so that's part of how the person gets brainwashed, is they orient themselves to this idea of force rather than understanding. And that's some of the stuff I'm going to be getting into part 3 in my nature video. But yes, it's something you must develop the appreciation. It's the same way that love is developed. It's you don't love someone because you choose to love them. You love them because you realize you love them, and then you foster the love through your choices thereafter. But it's not something where you see someone say, I'm going to love that person, and I'm going to go love them right now. That's not how love works. And it's the same thing with God. It's not something that is told to you. God is something experienced. Understanding of the deeper reality is something that is known not through education. That's why you can be a Harvard professor, but still not have wisdom. It's because these things come to you through the sensitivity, through the appreciation, through the love that is experienced by participating, not by choice. And I go into that in the book and talking about how love is not a choice. And when you're told you must love God to enter heaven, you're then being told that love is a choice, and it's not. And so this is a bad psychology to teach someone, because then they then orient to love through a decision rather than through their experience. And this is extremely detrimental to the person psychologically. And so I go into that in the book because that's never been dealt with, because when they were developing Christianity, the last thing on their mind was human psychology and behavior. It was about controlling, human control, and victimizing. And so that's why the psychology is bad. That's how you can break down Christianity, is through psychology. You're never going to bring a person to understanding by beating into them history, by beating into them where they are morally incorrect. You've got to go into and help that person understand through realization, through experience. That's how that stuff clarifies. You see, it's not driven in.
Yeah.
Wow.
I just really wanted to ask that because I know a lot of people sit there, well, you got to go out, you got to tell people. And it's like, but if I'm going out to tell them and I'm not doing that myself, isn't that a contradictory attitude? Because you're actually threatening.
Yeah, this is a great segue here. Okay, people ask me why I don't advertise and why I don't push my channel more. And the reason for that is simply because I only want people to find me who want to find me, because my message is not for the general everyday dude or gal. My message is for the person who is seeking. So a person who's not seeking and they see, oh, Chuck Swindoll, oh, he's talking about Jesus, I want to watch him. And so they turn my video on and I'm criticizing. And so that person is just going to be angry and shut it off. See, I'm not, that person is not seeking. Whereas, and it's the same thing when you're going door to door, you're pushing it onto people. Whereas if you use this appreciation technique, if you use the example technique, you're coaxing them in. And see, this is the same thing I'm doing with my channel. It's hard to find me. I got the same name as my dad, and his dad and my dad's videos fill YouTube. And so the only person that's going to find me is someone who wants to find me. It's someone who's heard some things that I've said and they're like, no, I've got to find this guy because I want to hear what he has to say. Well, then they're going to hear me. And that's the same thing with religion. If you're going door to door, those people don't want to hear it. They're going to listen to you when they see you outside behaving with your family and you're being really kind and loving and you're patient with your son when he just dented your car. They're going to see that and be like, wait a minute, why is that guy not all pissed off? And then that will coax them into then beginning to see a deeper principle in you, that knowledge that's not available to the Harvard professor. It's only available to the person who's sensitive and who realizes things at a different level than just education. And that you can't convey that through force. That has to come through the subtle aspects, through the intrinsic aspects that are deep within us. That's why the Khazarians have worked so hard to destroy the humanness in people, because it's that brings about love in you, that brings about appreciation into you, the sensitivity to this behavior that you see in others that's loving. You pick that up. A compassionate person will pick that up and wonder, now what's their technique? Now, how are they keeping this great attitude? You know what I'm saying? So that's why it doesn't work to do the door-to-door thing, or very rarely does, because you're forcing it in the same way it's happening when I try to advertise my page. People don't want to hear it. They're going to have to find me, and then they'll want to hear it.
Wow.
And I think that's a beautiful thing to state, because I find that when I'm actually doing something rather than telling someone, it's more harmony, I guess you could say, because it's not aggressive. But like you said, if they really want it, guess what? They found me.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And through just a conversation, they'll know. People, this is one of the things I found out with my videos. People watch you. People are observant. They listen to everything. Like people who are looking, people that are seeking, people who are looking for the deeper truths. They listen to every single word you're saying. That's why doing live is so tough for me, because there's no rewind button. And I can very easily quickly turn someone off. But people really pay attention. And that right there should show you, that's that human sensitivity coming out. That's that consciousness, that higher consciousness that's coming out. That's knocking on the door. And that's very subtle. But if you take the time and you're sensitive to that knocking, to that compassion within you that sees that person's different, that's where you awaken. That's how you coax out. You bring out this humanness that is inside every single person, and it has to be coaxed. It can't be demanded. You can't get it out through reading. You can't get it out through any other way but just experiencing and being sensitive in your interaction with others and your love for them and so forth. This is what brings it out, and it's contagious. We will pass it on to others. It is contagious because compassion and consciousness is contagious, for sure.
And my other thing is just a personal comment to Scott. And it's just simply because Chuck brought it up much earlier in the conversation. Do you remember I brought up a few days ago about the gallows?
Yes.
And see, Chuck came on and he spoke about the same thing in the same context that I did. So hopefully that's like a knock knock. Hi, Scott.
Yes. I love it. There you go.
Wow.
Now you know it's true.
Now I know that you two agree on it. Anyway, that's
Yeah, there you go.
Wow. Well, I just want to say, we have it's much like if a band is going into a club and they show the booking manager a tape and the manager asks who is it, and then you say it's you. We will be happy to promote Chuck Swindoll for you, Chuck. I mean, that's why we have you on the show. We want more people to know your work and your mind and your integrity and your passion. We have no problem being, I guess, some kind of bridge for more people to know about your work. And it's not just us. There's plenty of people. But you deserve it. You really have something beautiful and special, and we're happy to help get the word out any way that we can.
And if they find you through us, then they're probably the audience you're looking for anyway. I think so.
Truth.
Yeah.
Seriously,
Yeah,
thank
got
you
a great
guys.
audience.
I just can't believe how kind you guys have been to me and taking me on. I mean, I haven't done a bunch of interviews, so it's not like you knew what I was going to say. So I appreciate you risking and taking me on to risk and having me on here, because I know this show is important to you guys, and you don't want to have yahoos on here that are going to degrade the show. So I thank you for giving me the opportunity to present my stuff here, and thank you for supporting my work and being such a word of encouragement. I tell you, as you guys know this, I'm sure in your research, sometimes it gets discouraging when you get people that really lay it out on you and just tell you how horrible a person you are. It can get really discouraging. So it's always really encouraging to hear from you guys and the positive words and things that you've had to say about me today. Because, I mean, I didn't plant any of that. You guys have done that all on your own, and I cannot tell you how much I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. I mean, you've earned it. You've done great work. We're happy to promote it. It's good stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right, everybody. Well, I think we're going to say farewell tonight. Scott and I aren't going to go much longer. We have a big day tomorrow, and we want to just put the light on Chuck and his work, and we appreciate Kevin's questions. And look at the links below, however you want to follow us or Chuck. And and like I said, we're viewer supported, so anything helps. We really appreciate you guys. And I think that's all we have for right now. But yeah, we have Twitter, Telegram, you name it, it's all there. And we're happy that you guys are, please like, subscribe, share. We usually don't like to say that, but that's mainly so that more people can discover our guests, and it happens to be Chuck Swindoll this evening. So
at least we say it at the end of the video.
Yeah, we like to say that at the end of the video.
Off-putting when it's at the beginning.
Hi, you don't know what we're going to say, but like, subscribe, and you're like, well, I don't even know if I want to watch what you're going to say.
Seriously.
Yeah.
So
seriously. Thanks, gentlemen. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Peace. I'll see you guys later.
All right. Take care. Great night. All right.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Take care. All right.